Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to this June 10th meeting of the Somerville School Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2024, this meeting of the School Committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. The city has also asked me to read this. In the event of an emergency and we must evacuate the building, please locate the nearest emergency exit and exit to the farthest points of the parking lot away from the building. All exit doors have an exit sign above the doorway. All means of egress, including aisles, hallways, stairways, fire escapes, and exit doors within the council chambers through to the public way outside of City Hall, must remain free and clear from obstructions, including objects and persons. With that, Dr. Carmona, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, I will. So we start, Ms. Barish,
I'm here.
Mayor Ballantyne, President Owen Campen, Mr. Green, Mr. Bitton.
Here.
Ms. Bitton,
Present.
Dr. Ackman,
Here.
Dr. Phillips,
Here.
Ms. Krebschen.
Here.
We have quorum.
And I will now ask our interpreters to introduce themselves. Spanish.
Good evening, everyone. This is Spanish interpreter Tracy Pichardo. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Tracy Pichardo, seré su intérprete del español esta noche. Para escuchar esta reunión, haga un clic en el globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla y selecciona su idioma. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
And Portuguese.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sueli de Carne, and I will be your Portuguese interpreter for tonight. To listen to this meeting in Portuguese, click the globe on the bottom of your screen and select the language. Boa noite, meu nome é Sueli de Carne e eu serei a intérprete de português essa noite. Para ouvir essa reunião em português, clique no globo no pé da página e selecione a linguagem.
And Haitian Creole.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Angie Supri. I'll be your Haitian Creole interpreter for the evening. Bonsoir tout le monde. Nom c'est Angie. Je suis interprète pour nous à soir. Si nous besoin créole haïtien, tant pis cliquer sur le globe qui est en bas écran, sélectionnez français pour créole haïtien. Merci.
Thank you. And we will now have a moment of silence and then a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first item of business is awards and citations to our retirees. Dr. Carmona.
Well, it is a great pleasure to announce our awards and citations for those who have been committed to our community for so long. So we have, we'll be also having some principals here in honor to the retirees. So we have Charlene Buckley. So Barbara. So Karen Woods is, sorry about that. Karen, please come to the podium.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Woods. I'm the Chief Personnel Officer for the district, and I'm bringing up Charlene Buckley. So I'm speaking on behalf of Principal Pelletier, who's at soccer this evening.
Yes,
okay? So when Charlene leaves school this Friday, she will be closing the door on an amazing 31 years of teaching. 27 of them in Somerville and 26 at the West. In that time, Charlene has touched the lives of so many people in so many different ways. At West, Charlene is known as a teacher who engages, who engages kids in ways that center independence and joy, a partner to families who seek support and celebrate kids' growth. Whether it's holding the newest addition to our Wolfpack family in her arms, Nana Shar has always looked out for all of us. While her caring presence and the way it filled the building with laughter and lightness will be missed, we know she'll be back to visit, hopefully with some hilarious travel stories to share over lunch. Thank you for everything, Charlene.
Next, I'm going to have Ildefonso present an award for Deborah Doyle.
All right. Short legs. Good evening, everyone. I'm here to honor Debbie Doyle, who is retiring. Debbie is a diligent, hardworking paraprofessional who has worked for the district for the past 11 years. Prior to that, she helped to reestablish and co-chair the new Somerville Special Education Parent Advisory Council, or CPAC, in 2000, as the old one had become non-existent. She continued to be heavily involved with the CPAC for the next 18 years. Debbie also was involved in supporting her colleagues through her involvement in the union and her participation on the committee to establish a new performance review form for paraprofessionals. She has been a great asset to the special education department, to the district, to staff, families, and students. We will all miss her and wish her the very best as she moves on into the next chapter of her life. Debbie, thank you so much, and congratulations.
Now we have Steve Marshall is going to introduce Kristen Fudge.
So I've worked with Kristen for 25 years. She's been in the district for 35 years and is just an amazing asset to our building. Her desire to see students learn and grow is evident in everything she does. She's funny. A really quick side note on a secret snow person event. She gave me a live lobster. So she's got a good sense of humor. She's done a lot of fundraising for a lot of different things. She's just an overall, really important part of our community. And I always say this, but once you're a Kennedy Tiger, you're always a Kennedy Tiger. So congratulations.
And Ildefonso is also going to recognize Joy Nickel.
So I am speaking on behalf of Principal McGuire, who wasn't able to be here tonight. Joy Nickel has taught at the Brown School for almost 30 years. In that time, she has been the sole special education teacher for grades K through 5, and at one point 6th, right? She was well known, she is very well known for the way she cares and advocates for every one of her students. She developed deep relationships with her students, so much so that they periodically would return to visit her throughout the school year. Joy's love of children and education are evident when she is seen working with a student who may be struggling. She would try multiple strategies to assist any of her students, and she always followed up with her classroom teachers so they understood students' academic strengths and their needs. After 3 decades at the Brown School, we wish Joy Nickel all the best in her retirement. Joy, thank you so much for all your service, and congratulations.
going to recognize a few more retirees who are not here today, but I just wanted to acknowledge the great service that they have provided to our community. Barbara Favaloro, Kenneth Black, Teresa Delgado Castillo, Mary White, Sandra Morales, Robert Populo, Hugh Wallace, Cara Kivi, and Francis Carino. So thank you to their service and thank you for their retirement.
Okay, that brings us to the presentations of the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Award. Would Marcus Odelon please come up? The superintendent will present your award and I will read. Congratulations to Marcus Odelon for achieving the prestigious title of valedictorian of the class of 2024. His dedication, hard work, and exceptional academic achievements in the most rigorous program offered by SHS, with a total of 12 AP classes and a total GPA of 4.9, have earned him this honor. Not only has Marcus excelled in his studies, but he has also made significant contributions to our school, students, and community. For instance, Marcus served as National Honor Society in grade 11 and 12 and participated in various sports activities, among other accomplishments. We are proud of his accomplishments and confident that he will continue to achieve remarkable success at Yale University, where he will continue his education in pre-law. Congratulations once again on this incredible achievement. All right, now we would like to recognize Ian Bourne, our salutatorian. It is a pleasure to announce Ian Bourne as the salutatorian of the class of 2024. Ian is an outstanding student athlete that has dedicated countless hours to achieving his academic and athletic goals throughout high school. Ian has taken on every academic challenge available to him at Somerville High School and has maintained a near-perfect 4.86 weighted GPA. This includes receiving straight A's in 11 different advanced placement courses from sophomore to senior year. Ian was nominated by his peers and coaches as captain of the varsity basketball and baseball teams. His athletic accomplishments are as impressive as his academic accomplishments, and he is in the midst of a remarkable varsity baseball season. Ian committed to Swarthmore College early on in his senior year and will continue his baseball career at the collegiate level while studying engineering. Ian is also a talented musician and has been a section leader in the Somerville High School Orchestra and member of the school band prior to high school. Ian stands out from his peers in so many ways, academically, athletically, and due to his character and integrity. He is a role model to other students at the high school, and adults and students alike look to him to lead in the classroom, in the halls, and in athletics. He has left a long-standing mark on Somerville High School, and we will be proud to call him an alum for many years to come. We will now take a 5-minute recess just so that members can individually congratulate our students and our retirees. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Everybody is back. So next up is our student reps, but I think they're all seniors, so we've lost them all. So there's no student reps this evening. Next, we have approval of minutes. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from the March 18th, 2024 and April 1st, 2024 school committee meetings.
Second.
Is there okay, I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Mr. Bitone. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. That brings us to public comment. Before we will begin, I will read our instructions. Welcome and thank you to those who have signed. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do public comment, I forgot that I meant to say this. All of our public comment is about our absence policy around protests. So just to give public commenters some understanding of where we are, the only thing on the agenda tonight is for a first reading, so we're not actually voting on anything this evening. Also, the Rules Subcommittee actually saw these earlier before this meeting and decided to vote something to this committee. So just for some clarity, so you'll know where we are, I'm going to have the chair of our Rules Committee give us just a brief explanation of where we are and what we're talking about. So, Ms. Barish?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Krupchen. Earlier this evening, the Rules Management Subcommittee moved to pass the separate proposal on guidelines to excuse participation in protests developed in collaboration between Somerville High School administrators and students to the full committee. I'm going to read the small section of that part of the handbook that specifically addresses this issue. It says, participation in a protest will also be excused following these guidelines. Up to 4 absences per year will be excused due to participation in a protest. In addition to parent-guardian permission for leaving campus, students must complete a protest reflection form in order for the absence to be excused. If a student wishes to participate in more than 4 protests during a school year, the student will be required to complete an educational plan with the assistant principal. As Chair Krupchen and I both said, we did pass this out of rules, so tonight this will be before this committee for a first reading, and then most likely would be on the agenda on the 17th for a second reading, and that's the point where we would potentially vote on it.
Okay, so with that, I'm now going to read our public comment guidelines, and then I will invite people up for public comment. Welcome and thank you to those who've signed up for public comment. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present their material. However, the chair may limit comments to 2 minutes based on the number of individuals signed up to speak. We do have 5 people signed up, so I will allow the full 3 minutes. Speakers should begin their comments by stating their name and address, or in the case of district employees, their role within the district. The chair of the meeting, after a warning, reserves the right to terminate speech which is not constitutionally protected because it constitutes true threats that are likely to provoke a violent reaction and cause a breach of the peace or incitement to imminent lawless conduct, or which contains obscenities. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between the public and the committee. Members of the committee will not reply to public comment in the course of the meeting, though individual members may follow up, and items from public comment may be taken up in future meetings. The school committee will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor against any member of the school committee in public session. Individuals may address topics on the agenda or items within the school committee's scope of responsibility, such as the district budget, goals and policies, or role of the superintendent. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing for inclusion in the public record. So with that, I will read 3 names at a time so you know who's coming up. So first I have Jennifer Martinez, then Brian Sokol, and then Richard Maidman. Jennifer Martinez, the floor is yours.
So like address, what do you mean?
Just your name and address, correct.
Like full address?
I have it on here, so just that you live in Somerville, that's fine.
Okay. I'm Jennifer Martinez and I live in Somerville. As of a week ago, Palestine holds the record for the highest population of child amputees in the world. It isn't happening here, but we have students that go out of their way to do the research, to seek out the information that most news outlets aren't broadcasting. They've been doing homework outside of their own. You should be encouraging this, not making them feel like silence and ignorance is what they should be striving for. If we can't even support students' right to speak up and protest.
We're having trouble hearing you.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Pause the clock.
Does this work? No.
Try,
Hello? Does that work?
okay.
Okay. I'll restart that. If we can't even support students' right to speak up and protest as much as they can, that Black Lives Matter sign outside is completely performative. There's an issue in terms of how to articulate themselves, and the high school should be prioritizing educating our students on how to do so, not just shut them down and make them feel like they shouldn't speak up. All the students want to do is use their voice to help secure a world in which the safety and security of both Palestinians and Jews between the river and the sea is intertwined and guaranteed. It starts there. It should be what Somerville stands up for. We should be proud and grateful that we have students, people with such conviction. If humanity is what you and Somerville actually stand for, do something. Yeah.
Okay. Next, I have Brian Sokol, then Richard Maidman, and then Giovanna Calvillo. Brian, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Brian Sokol, and I live in Union Square. I'm the parent of a Somerville High 2023 alum and two other children in the 5th and 9th grade who are not currently in the public schools but have been so in the past and may return in the future. I would like to express my support for the compromise revision of the excused absence policy for protests. The policy does not need to be all or nothing. Allowing for excused absences for protests addresses the concern that the changing the policy will silence student voices and suppress their passion for justice. At the same time, it limits disruption to learning and chronic absences. Requiring parental permission also helps allay concerns about the school's responsibility for student safety. But the linchpin of the proposed policy is the requirement of the protest reflection form in order for the absence to be excused. The idea advances several educational and administrative objectives. Most obviously, it pushes students to learn more about the political issue they are protesting and hones their ability to think and write critically about controversial topics. Ideally, the reflection form can also help offset some of the pitfalls of protests. Protests can be educational, inspiring, and important, but they can also disseminate misinformation and reinforce propaganda, groupthink, and narrow-mindedness. For the protest reflection form to further our educational goals, the form should direct the students to cover the following topics. 1, key historical and current facts about the issue. 2, the arguments and reasons why they felt strongly about the issue. 3, an exploration and engagement with opposing points of view. 4, a description of the personal experience at the protest and anything new they might have learned there. And finally, 5, students should consider whether they agreed with everything said, chanted, or sung, or whether there might be parts of the protest that they disagreed with. The reflection form has a secondary function of validating that the student actually attended the event, since they were expected to provide a personal, non-plagiarized account. Requiring this additional work will discourage students from leaving the school without actually attending the protest, which anecdotally we think many students have done. On the other hand, students who are deeply passionate about a particular cause ought not to be deterred by doing extra thinking and writing about it. They'll be asked to share their thought processes and arguments, to engage deeply, employ critical thinking, and sharpen their views. Ultimately, this will amplify rather than suppress student voices. School administrators might not attend the protests and hear their chants, but they will read their forms. The proposed new policy is a very reasonable compromise that addresses most concerns from both sides. In particular, the protest reflection form ought to help open students' minds and hearts wider rather than closing them, and it advances the district's educational goals, which are, quote, to nurture innovative ideas, foster pride and diversity, inspire students to become lifelong learners, and empower them to enrich their communities.
Thank you. Your time's up. Next, I have Richard Maidman, then Giovanna Calvillo, and then Veronica Cañas. Richard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Richard Maidman. I live in Somerville. I'm an international lawyer, and I have 2 children in Somerville schools. While the proposed revised policy is an improvement on the existing protest policy, the school committee should eliminate the policy for the following reasons. First, parents give custody of their children to Somerville schools for the duration of the school day. The Somerville schools are responsible for those children's safety during that time. The policy exposes Somerville schools to serious liability should anything happen to any of the students they allow to leave school. Simple parental permission to leave school is unlikely to insulate Somerville schools from legal liability. Second, the policy does not define what a protest is. A student could simply leave school during the day in protest of school, and that would be allowed under the policy. Indeed, this is exactly what happened at the walkouts that occurred this spring, where far more students left school than attended protests. Third, Somerville schools must maintain neutrality and be apolitical. That applies to teachers as well. Teachers cannot promote one protest over another, nor can they inform students of one type of protest at the expense of others, as that would be improper political speech and violate neutrality. The policy subjects the Somerville schools to burdensome oversight responsibilities. Fourth, the policy results in disruption of the learning environment at Somerville High School. At the last committee meeting, a Somerville educator contended that protests are supposed to be disruptive. At one protest this spring, students chanted hate speech as they left school and class sizes suffered. Some teachers did not teach their lesson plans for the rest of the day, which harmed the remaining students' right to education. Further, permitting groups of students to leave during the day ostracizes those who remain. Fifth, Somerville High School has average to below average test scores compared to other Massachusetts high schools. It is hard to imagine that permitting students to miss more school will improve performance. Sixth, Massachusetts law emphasizes the importance of student attendance in school during the school day. In fact, Massachusetts law actually makes it illegal to induce a student to unlawfully miss school during the school day. That's a $200 fine. Last, I've heard people claiming that removing the protest policy could silence students, and I don't think that's correct. Students can go protest at 2:30 p.m. when the school day ends, or on the weekend. Thank you.
Next, I have Giovanna Calvillo and then Veronica Cañas. Giovanna, the floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Giovanna Calvillo. I live on 1 Watson Street. I've lived in Somerville for 5 years. I'm a social worker and a therapist, and I live with my partner. She's Palestinian. I always like to name this just because I think naming the history of Palestinians is very important. Her grandfather was forcibly displaced from Jerusalem in 1948 by Zionist militia. We're currently witnessing millions of Palestinians and her family members die and go through a second Nakba. And seeing the community here in Somerville refuse to recognize the genocide and violence that Israel has enacted for the last 76 years continues to make me lose trust in our city. And I do believe that changing the policy does also impact the students' trust in you as well. I ask that you condemn the ongoing genocide currently going on against the Palestinians in Gaza and call for a ceasefire now. Codify the brave students' right to protest an ongoing genocide, and ideally uphold the previously existing excused attendance policy. It does make me concerned about the timing of this change in policy, and I do hope that you will give the students that are protesting now the same opportunity to protest under the same circumstances as previously. It does beg the question, why now? And as always, Palestine is the exception when it comes to liberal values, so I hope that you do not let Palestine be the exception. Lastly, I would like you to recognize that From the River to the Sea as a call for the full rights and freedom of all Palestinians and allow students and staff to use the phrase without disciplinary action, and publicly apologize for the comparison of Somerville high schoolers to white nationalists. Actually, could I also talk about one additional thing?
You have a minute.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, I would just like to mention regarding our student budget, you know, as Americans, so much of our power is tied to consumption, so it's really important that we make every effort to conduct ethical purchasing choices. I ask you as an individual and elected official on the Somerville School Committee to boycott HP. HP is directly invested in Israel's current genocide in Gaza and decades-old apartheid regime. Not only does HP hold a lucrative contract to furnish Israeli military's computers, printers, and servers, but they've also developed ID card systems that the government uses to classify and target Palestinians. This system maintains a cruel second-class status for Palestinians that denies them the same access as Israelis for walking on roads, sidewalks, subjects them to humiliation and abuse at Israeli checkpoints, and restricts their rights to housing, employment, marriage, business ownership, and the list goes on. It's really important that we take into consideration.
Your time is up.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Next, I have Veronica Cañas. Veronica, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Veronica, and I live on Simpson Avenue. I want to speak today about the proposed changes to the student attendance policy that currently allows excused absences for student protests. Members of the school committee have stated that the desire to change the attendance policy predates student protests for Palestine. Regardless of whether or not this is true, having the vote after a student walkout in support of Palestine and after a committee member condemns speech in support of Palestinian liberation makes this appear to be an explicit attempt to limit pro-Palestine speech. Limiting speech and actions in support of Palestinian liberation and against genocide is not only racist, it places the school committee on the side of those committing genocide. If you're truly concerned about not disrupting student learning, you wouldn't limit their opportunities to learn about the impact they have in their community through exercising their right to protest and free speech. What is the point of teaching history and civics if you're going to take away their opportunities to apply what they've learned in the classroom? That's why I'm asking you to codify the students' right to protest and to keep the current existing attendance policy. Thank you.
That concludes public comment. Next up is the district report. Superintendent?
Through the chair. So good evening, everyone. We have an important agenda today as we near the end of a meaningful year of learning and growth. Today we're focused on celebrating the inspiring achievements of many of our students. We will also highlight the amazing work that our educators and staff are doing to expand out-of-school time enrichment offerings and prepare for early release Wednesday next school year. Later this evening, you will hear from Rosanna Paravello and Adriana Gurecke, the director and assistant director of out-of-school time, who will share about the tremendous work their team has engaged in to expand quality offerings. You will also hear from the Director of Educator Development, Chris Glynn, who will discuss the in-depth planning that has gone into ensuring educators will have the time and support they need to engage in expanded professional development. And this will be enabled through the early release Wednesdays. With that, I'd like to kick it off by congratulating our amazing scholars at Somerville High School and Full Circle who graduated last week. You all deserve a wonderful summer as you start your journey into adulthood. I attended my first Somerville High School and Full Circle graduations as superintendent, and it was both touching and uplifting. And I can't wait to see what our graduates can accomplish. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Assistant Superintendent Boston Davis. No, correct. I'm sorry. I'm going to have, this is the time to have Mrs. Paravello and Mrs. Gurecke come to the front to share. Unfortunately, we couldn't do this last time we were here because we ran out of time, but we are finally here. I know this has been one of the items that I hear from families consistently. So thank you for the work, and we're all yours.
Thank you, members of school committee, for the opportunity to provide an update regarding out-of-school time. My name is Rosanna Parabello. I am the Director of Out-of-School Time Programming for the district. Focusing on the whole child, and that means not just providing students with a rich learning experience during the school day, but also providing students with learning and enrichment experience outside the regular school day. That helps them explore their passions and gain important life skills. This year has been a wonderful year of learning, exploration, and change. Excuse me. Not only working with our departments within the district, but also working with our city and community partners to expand options and opportunities. With the diligent work of SFLC and Summer Promise, a summer camp fair was revived. Next slide. Nearly 2,000 SPS students are participating in school-based structured out-of-school time programs. That's more than 40% of the overall student population being served an array of high-quality programs. This includes programs such as community schools, partner-led programs in our schools, and varsity and club sports. This represents some of the larger OST programs in which our students are involved. Next slide. We have focused on 3 areas: expanding opportunities for multiple age groups. It is important to have an array of programming that meets the interests and needs of our students. Equitable access to programming. Ensuring that our most vulnerable students are aware of program and have access, and that means working with other departments such as SFLC and our city members to ensure that families have access. Cross-sector partnership. This work entails more than just SPS. This needs to continue to be a citywide partnership. Constant communication with out-of-school time providers is essential. We only just started this process with the intent this year, and we'll continue to improve this working together. Next slide. We know there's a greater need. How have we been working to address this? Assessing needs, listening to feedback from school leaders and families, mapping out who we know can do this work and who we need to connect with to bring exceptional providers to share their passions. Getting it done and recruiting students to participate, then listening to feedback from those directly involved. Again, constant communication and data collection to evaluate and make changes. Next slide. Our partner programs are an important piece of this puzzle. This slide offers a glance at some of the primary OST programs in which SPS students are enrolled and the current school year enrollment numbers. Many new clubs and organizations were offered this year and have shown to be successful and will continue to run over the summer or next year or both. The list is by no means of all of what is offered during out-of-school time, but representative of a range of SPS programs available. There are many other school-based clubs and activities that students participate in, such as varsity sports and school-based clubs that are offered directly on the school premises by teachers. Next slide. This slide shows the enrollment growth of programs over time. Some of our programs continued virtually in 2020 to 2021, where numbers may differ. We have new providers running in their second or third year due to popularity. Next slide. Here you can see the growth over the years and the number of students enrolled. Missing from this slide are students who are enrolled in clubs, which equals about 200 students across the district, and that does not include the teacher-led clubs specific to each school. Next slide. Early Release Wednesdays. This year, we've started piloting with different providers to provide clubs on particular days of the week for an hour, and we'll continue to expand on this for the Early Release Wednesdays and evaluate new providers, work with members of the community to figure out how we continue to provide these clubs on per site and ensure that there's equitable access across all sites, all of the elementary schools. And now I'm going to hand it over to the Assistant Out-of-School Time Director, Adriana Garecki, to speak about community schools.
Good evening. My name is Adriana Guareque. I'm the out-of-school out-of-school assistant director. I'm here to talk about community schools. I wanted to let you know first that is the first time presenting in front of you guys, so I'm super nervous, so bear with me.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Enrollment trends. As you can see, post-pandemic, our enrollment has increased every year. For this upcoming school year, we have 905 students enrolled. Next slide, sorry. For visual learners like me, we have the enrollment trends chart, which shows a clear increase by year. Next slide. Operational structure. We run programming in 8 elementary schools for students from pre-K to 8th grade. Each school is overseen by a site director and an assistant site director. We have wraparound support from a clinical consultant and a student service coordinator. Our staff is made by lead teachers, assistant teachers, and high school students. Most of our staff work part-time, and some work in the morning as paraprofessionals or in other fields. We also count with community partners offering specialized activities like rock climbing, karate, parkour. Our ratio goal is pre-K 1 to 10 and school-age students 1 to 13. Next slide. Registration process. Registration took place in March. Our enrollment is done after school placement is announced. This year, we sent confirmations of enrollment at the beginning of May. We use a weighted enrollment process. Returning and financially challenged families are prioritized. We are lucky to have in our team a variety of multilingual staff working with us, and we all help to support families. The number of seats available is based on staff predictions, so keep your finger crossed, please, because we need a lot of people. Placement continues through the fall to accommodate as many families as possible. Next slide. Registrations. Over the past several years, we have started working on moving away from the first-come, first-served model, using a weighted system to be equitable and transparent with our families. Factors taken in consideration include, but are not limited to, returning families, single or two parents household working full-time, multilingual families, families that have subsidized child care vouchers, referrals from the Department of Children and Families, and income level. Next slide. Here you can see enrollment by schools for this year and the upcoming school year. We have almost 1,000 registrations for the upcoming school year. And as I mentioned before, we were able to accommodate 905 students. Next slide. In this slide, you can see we have enrolled and waitlisted. It's a waitlisted the enrollment and waitlisted chart for the school year 2024-2025. Next slide. Teacher recruitment effort. We use Talented, we post on Indeed, we also use Handshake to connect with college students. We attend job fairs. We open more high school level positions to create a pathway for students to advance into higher level positions. We share our open positions with the school liaisons, our families and friends. This year we start a collaboration with Scale that we are very excited about it. Thank you for your time, and now I will pass it back to Ms. Parabello.
Next slide. Oh, no. No, I think we missed one. Investing in our youth. Yeah, there we go. We are incredibly grateful for the generous support from the mayor, the school committee, the city council, and the community at large, which has allowed us to continue to increase our investment in youth. Next slide. This year alone, we invested more than $4 million in out-of-school time programming to support Somerville Public School youth. This investment does not include additional investments that support OSD programming, such as club sports, varsity sports, and the school-based clubs. This year, we heard the need for more programming that covers a wide range of skills and concept and delivered, and will continue to expand. Next slide. Here is a breakdown showing the increase of out-of-school time spending. Oh, no, slide before. The investment this year will also continue through this summer, and also through the next school year, we will continue to receive the support to ensure that we can maintain our partner programs and look to expand programming and support families that continue to need after-school care. Next slide. Ultimately, we are part of a larger system needed to deliver high-quality, diverse programming. We want our families to have access to a rich array of programs. Out-of-school time experience provides students with exposure to the world around them. In partnership with other SPS departments, city departments, and our community partners, we're committed to building a strong OST ecosystem to keep students active and engaged. We appreciate all the feedback that we receive, and especially appreciate the connections that parents have made with our school-based programs, our after-school directors. This partnership is important to do this work, and they have been exceptional leaders in supporting the changes and growth, and also working with our new members of the team, including our manager of partnerships and programs. We will continue to create and build upon what we've already started. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. I will start with Dr. Ackman.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, great job. I was excited to learn about it. I was excited to hear about the out-of-school time. This is just a pipe dream request that I have, and this is coming in part from me as a parent, but one of the things I think about, because there are all these programs, and if it were to happen, I would imagine it would have to be housed on the city side somehow, but in thinking about specifically summer programming as out-of-school time programming, like if we can have, almost like we have with our wonderful calendar that I know Dr. Boston Davis has worked many years to make as gorgeous as it is now, like by calendar month opportunities that are available to kids on, like, I mean, I know you can't be fully comprehensive, but like from rec, from community schools, if there are priority partners, like, I think that would be just kind of a dream come true, because like I stumbled upon a canoeing opportunity for my kids too late, but like got them signed up for the soccer, 3-day soccer, I forget the word for it right now, but that's with high school students. It's a fundraiser for Somerville, for high school soccer that I'm so excited to have them participate in, that is on the rec side. So I think you are doing an amazing job. I want to be very clear, like, and I'm so happy that we are prioritizing families with needs. And thank you for the great work, because algorithms are complicated, right? But I just, like, that's my vision, and I don't know if it's possible to make it.
No, thank you. Thank you for your comment, and I do like that idea of a calendar. That's the first time I think we've heard that feedback, so let's see what we can do.
I have Dr. Green and then Ms. Parrish. Mr. Green. Sorry.
Do that to me.
Sorry.
No
Mr.
PhDs
Green.
here. I'm actually really glad I got to go after Dr. Ackman, because I think it gives some context for what I'm about to say. First of all, what I'm about to say makes me feel really old, because I'm going to go back 10 years, or 8 years. I really appreciate you putting up that slide about the increasing enrollment of community schools, because I think it provides much needed context for the conversation about where we go from here. When I joined school committee way back in the before times, it was still the case that community schools was kind of this like hidden treat for people in the know. And the work we've done over the last 8 years to expand that, in parts spurred by a then young fellow named Jeffrey Curley about the inequities in out-of-school time. I think it's one of the places where we really, over the last 8-9 years, lived our values about trying to make a more equitable district. And we've expanded dramatically. I don't know if that's how well that is. I think the challenge going forward, and I think the reason this has become a salient issue, especially after the pandemic, is that we're trying to conflate two different needs which, with one solution, I think, there is the real fact that in this district, in this state, in this country, low-income students get less instructional time than middle-income and high-income students. The enrichment programs that we call enrichment programs are really just different forms of instruction, are shown to improve test scores and just the time spent in structured learning programs of any sort is a real inequity. That's why we originally started expanding community schools and why we're still focusing on students with needs as our focus priority there. But what we're hearing from parents, especially since the pandemic ended, is also the real need for just childcare. And I am, as a working parent, I am deeply cognizant of that need myself. If I had to pay for childcare, and I don't know that I could still afford to live in Somerville. But I think when we have the conversation we need to have over the next year about the future of out-of-school time, I don't want us to conflate those two things. I think, so that's really my comment about how we go from here, is how we have this conversation about the very real need for working parents to have childcare, and the expectation, fair or otherwise, that schools should be a place that happens, and the real educational need to address still fairly large gaps in formal learning time between low-income and middle-income students. All that said, thank you so much for your work over the last 8 years. It really does show.
Thank you.
I have Ms. Barish, and then Dr. Phillips, and then Mr. Butone.
Through you, first, thank you for the presentation. I'll just echo what Mr. Green said about how much the programming has expanded and improved, and how much more inclusive it has become over the years. It's wonderful. In response to Dr. Ackman's comment, I wonder if maybe the Somerville Hub is a place where that calendar might exist, and I know that you're not in charge of the hub, but maybe through Children's Cabinet or, all those folks who are in charge of the hub, that might be since it already exists, it might be a good place to make it happen if it's at all possible.
Dr. Phillips, and then Mr. Butone.
Thank you for your excellent presentation and for all the work you're doing to expand out of school time in this city. I think it's no secret that I do not believe that this belongs on the district's plate, right? There are none of the model out of school time systems across the country in nearby us are run entirely by their school district. We are the only one, and I don't think it's fair that our school district is responsible for providing care for every child in our community outside of schools. So that's just my opinion. My question, though, is about the community schools weighted lottery. I think it's 100% right that we are targeting community schools to the families who need it the most. But I've heard a lot from families wondering about how that weighted formula worked this year. I'm wondering if you can be more transparent with us tonight about exactly how we kind of figured out which kids got in based on that, and if in the future we could put that out publicly like the enrollment department does on their Choosing a School enrollment data webpage.
Yes, no, we can. I think because this is the first time we were doing this process in a way that we can report, we can share that information. We focused on ensuring that families were able to register and participate in that on time. I think in the past it's been, we have been flexible in changing our process to accommodate school day registration. So if you've noticed, we've changed it along the years. to try to figure out what is the best way to do after-school enrollment. So the way we did it last year was to do it at the same time as pre-K and K enrollment. However, it doesn't go as smoothly when families don't know their assignment and then are assigned to schools they don't actually have seats at. So we revised it, and that process went much smoother this time. We didn't have any of those issues that we had last year. So that was a plus. And then in terms of, yes, we can share the process. It was based on what Adriana explained on the factors that were used. We've placed families into levels according to returning, and then those factors that Adriana explained, so that returning families were enrolled, whereas last year some returning families were not enrolled based on the way the enrollment was done. So this year we feel that that was an important piece, and we've heard differing opinions on this, but if your child is in 4th grade and has only known this program, it's really hard for them to make a transition to another program. So we were trying to respect that piece of it for the child's sake. So I know that has been, you know, opinions that we have heard about changing the way that we do the system. We're listening to the feedback. But again, so families were placed in levels according to those factors, and then we enrolled. And like we said, we were happy to report out that there were less families waiting on the wait list. Like last year, we had higher amounts at certain schools, and this year, like for instance, Kennedy and Genziano always seem to be our hardest ones to fit all the students into, and we have, compared to last year, much lower, almost half the amount of students waiting on that wait list. So I hope I answered your question. I'm kind of going on a tangent, but these are things that we're thinking about, and how to share that information in a good way.
I have Mr. Bitone, and then Mr. Green, and then Ms. Barish, and then Ms. Patel.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you for all the terrific work you've been doing. In many ways, you are victims of your own success. You have, my own kids went to community schools and had fantastic experiences, and I think word has spread. The wait lists that you talked about continue to, have grown, and then I'm glad that this year they seem to be sort of more manageable. I want to +1 everything my colleague Dr. Phillips said earlier, so I don't need a separate response, but I just wholeheartedly agree that community schools can't be the only game in town. That's something that the prior superintendent, Mary Skipper, said often when I asked her about out-of-school time, and it continues to be true. And then the call for transparency, I think, the capable teachers and administrators of this program are struggling, I think, to explain what is a confusing process, and our families would really benefit from that. So a lot to just say +1 to what she said. The other piece of this that I've heard is that our wait lists may not be fully reflective of need in our communities. So some school communities who have majority lower income families may not know that they can sign up and that there's opportunities available for subsidized care, if there is. And so I wonder to what degree, and I welcome your thoughts on this, to what degree can we reach out to those communities and get a fuller sense of what demand is beyond simply relying on the wait list. That said, we can't build out community schools to infinity, so we know that, and we need to rely on our partners and the full, what I'm hoping could be a kaleidoscope of, offerings for after-school care for our kiddos. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the feedback. I will echo everyone's voices as well. When I first came in, I was also worried about the sheer request of attention that needed to be paid on community schools because of the volume of requests to have students in the program. After working with Rosanna and her team, it is pretty clear that the work that they continue to do is basically not keeping up with the demand, despite the fact that the work that is happening is quite honorable. I think that that's the challenge, as Mr. Biton said, is that we are the recipients of our own success. I guess we're victims of our own success. But a couple of things that I'll say is my understanding that the main criteria for giving someone a spot the next year after they have, when they move to the next year, is that they have been in the program. And so the fact that the program in some degree, at some point, depending on folks signing in first in, that the structure of the participation of the families in the program has been kind of a legacy from the past. And so in some degree, most of the parents who attend the program actually have been the parents who have access to information and who have been privileged in that sense. So the reality is that if you look at the composition of the community schools, it still favors the challenge that Andrew Green mentioned. So we keep on asking, well, let's balance that. But in reality, the programs are in some degree maxed out in terms of capacity. And so knowing that the first criteria is actually around, if you participated in the program, you will be given a spot. For the new folks who come in, that's when we look at the issues of single parent, two parents, multilingual learners, and also the question about finances. So I think that, I hear a lot of questions about transparency, but I don't think it's more, I think it's more of an issue of capacity. The capacity that we have is limited, and so for new folks who come in, they say, well, I need a spot in there, but the criteria in some degree defines that. One more thing I want to say, so that's kind of an inconsistent in terms of the call for more spaces, knowing that the structure that is in there is pretty much already set, because the capacity is also limited. We will have to actually check with our union president and teams around how do we increase the capacity of rooms that we use, and then hiring more people. That's another, there's multiple layers to this. But the last thing I want to say is that the city is actually just hired, or is in the process of hiring, a member that is going to join the same team. It's a Braided funded program that would allow us to reach out to our providers in the city. So similar to what we do with early childhood. And so this is a very promising partnership, because it would allow us also to extend or bring more partners that are local partners to create some ways to provide more support. But again, the space is an issue. Classrooms, we only have a certain number of classrooms so we'll have to rearrange how we create spaces in every building. So there's more that meets the eye, but I just wanted to recognize the fact that it is a significant program. The changes that have happened are very positive, and folks are asking for it because it also addresses a challenge that we have in a community in which families have to work.
I had Mr. Green, Ms. Barish, Ms. Baton. Mr. Green?
First of all, thank you to the superintendent for all their remarks. Said a lot of what I was going to say. I want to give 1.5 cheers to Dr. Phillips' point. When I mentioned the need to think about enrichment and childcare separately, part of what I strongly believe is that we should not be in the childcare business. We're not a daycare. To the purposes that people need parental coverage, and I agree that they do, I agree with Dr. Phillips that needs to be a city issue, or really a state issue, but we'll put it on the city for now. That said, I very strongly believe we are in the educational enrichment game, and that is a strong equity issue, so I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that. And again, this mentioned a lot of what I want to say about the quote-unquote algorithm, but I will say, and this is maybe deeply unpopular, I want to make sure we always leave some room for human judgment in that algorithm, because what we've seen in other places where it is just a formula is that people learn really quickly, especially people with privilege, how to game that formula to their own advantage. And I want to make sure we don't do that.
Ms. Barish and then Ms. Paton.
Thank you. Through you, a question that I have gotten is why the waitlist numbers are different at each school. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the process of sort of how staffing matches up to how many students can go, because I think I understand it, but I can't really explain it.
So to start, so we have some schools that we keep our teachers there for years and years and years. So that makes a big difference because, it's a strong teams in certain schools. So that, with that being said, we know how many students we can get in, we know that we can serve so many, we know the capacity of these teachers working with the students. So that's one thing. The other thing is that in certain schools with different needs, we need to be careful how many students we get, because the last thing we want, you need to keep, we always keep in consideration the most important thing is keeping these children safe. No matter what we do, the safety is the first thing that we look at. So if we know that we're losing a certain number of teachers, we do our diligence, we're trying to get more people, but still, we don't know if the people that the new staff are gonna be capable to deal with certain things. So we are very aware of that, and we try to make very smart decisions in terms of how many students we let. And the other thing is the way it works is, for example, if I have a kindergarten, I have 15 kindergartens with one adult, or 13 supposed to be 13, because don't forget, we are EC licensed, so we need to keep the ratios. So we have 13 kindergartens, and the next student in the waiting list is coming, but it's a third grader, and we still have a space there, we cannot. And I think that's what a lot of people get very confused, because they're like, well, I'm the number 2, why they haven't called me? Because your child's grade is full, and we will need another teacher in that grade. So we're working on getting maybe the third grader teacher, so so everything. And the other reason, very important, is that when you interview somebody, you need to know who are you interviewing, what are they good at, with what group age. You do not just say, oh, I need a 5th grade teacher, and I'm gonna put this woman that just knows how to teach, hang out with the little kids and, with the younger students. So it's not gonna work. You're putting this person to fail. So another reason is that they wanna go to this school because they work in the morning nearby, or they work in the morning as a paraprofessional. So if you start adding all those things, it just gets very difficult to, we can focus in, we need teachers at Winter Hill, or we need teachers at East, but in reality, when we interview is when we find out where that person is going to be. And sometimes we send it to a school that we know we don't want to lose people, so we send them to the school that we know they're going to be great. Yeah. Too sexy.
Thank you so much. It's clearly very complicated.
It is. It does get complicated.
Thank you. Ms. Paton, and then Dr. Phillips.
Thank you, through you, Chair Krupchen. Thank you again for being here. It's incredible how much this work has evolved over the last X years. I think Mr. Green spoke to that. It's just been a sea change, and as Mr. Bitton said, that this is a result of the success, and that people really want this programming. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm going to start out with a question about demographics of the student population. So Superintendent Carmona spoke about the fact that we're going to continue to offer to families that I've already creates a challenge for the program, because we understand why we would want to do that, but at the same time, new families who come in, there's less opportunity for them. But I imagine that as we use this weighted system, which I appreciate you saying that you want to be more public about it, that we may see some shift in demographics over time. So I'm curious, A, if we've seen that in the pre-K or K, and B, I'd really like any future presentation, unless you guys have an issue with this and you think I'm off base, that we should be looking at that, because I would think that would be part of our objective is making sure that students who don't have other alternatives are getting high-quality programming. And it gets into that question of what our goals are for this programming, whether it's through the city, a combination of the city and the schools. You know, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, although I do agree that you guys have a good point to make there. That's not our decision. We can advocate for that, and I encourage that, but we're not going to make that decision right now at this table, unless someone has some great way to do that, which I would be behind. So the question is around, you know, how is the mission or our vision of this work shifting, and then how is our data going to reflect that over time? And so I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that.
Yeah, Dr. Carmona?
So part of the work that we're doing, so we're collaborating with SFLC, with Chris Hoffman from the, Hoffman from, what is the name of the? Summer Promise, and OST in my office, and we actually are going to seek out a needs assessment for the actual OST program. I think that there is Emmanuel College. There's a college that actually does rate the programs and also assesses them in terms of quality impact. And so that process is underway, actually through the funds of the city, again with this collaboration with Summer Promise. So we will be asking those questions as part of that as well. So I think that once a report comes out, we'll be able to share with you. We haven't contracted yet, but that is, the funds are there. The interest is there, and the willingness to make sure that we are true to the needs of our district. Yeah.
Okay. I have Dr. Phillips, Dr. Ackman, and then I'll go back to Ms. Patone.
This is all really exciting, and I'm glad to see this work moving forward. What I'm about to say, I'm going to say it, but I'm also mindful of how Mary used to tell us, you can't policy your way out of a programmatic issue. And we say consistently, if there are enough kids, we will open, and we have the staff, we will open a new classroom for out-of-school time programming. And yet I hear under people's breath over and over again that it's not just finding the staff, that getting teachers to let us use their classrooms after school may also be an issue. And so I'd like to request to you, Chair, that you refer to rules the consideration of a policy around the use of classroom space after school.
Dr. Carmona, did you want to respond to that?
I see our union president here shaking his head. There are some contractual, regulations that are driven by the contract. I definitely, would like to live in an environment in which the space belongs to all of us to solve any problems. But I think that is a question that has to be. That's why I mentioned the union president at the beginning, because it's a question about how do we create a space for all our teachers also, some of them work in the building, and so it's a little bit more complex than that. So I don't know, you asked for
It sounds like that may not be the most effective policy issue. It sounds like it's more of a practice issue.
It's an inquiry that I have also as well, and an interest in terms of how do we do this at a scale that is possible. And I hear what Member Green said in regards to the issue of childcare versus providing. And so until we have a system that addresses both and fixes them, we have to still figure it out how we serve our communities. And so ideally, we should be able to provide services to our kids that addresses the gaps that we have, the academic gaps. But in reality, the need is so large across the board that we have to continue to look for options to support all our kids. But I think that is a legitimate question, and is one that I'm exploring again. So I don't have an answer right now, but it's one that I'm curious about as well.
Hopefully we'll get an update on that soon. Dr. Ackman, and then Ms. Patone.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is because my kids do not attend community schools. This is my own sort of clarification that I'm seeking. So I've heard that families that were in community schools are prioritized to get community school slots again. How does the summer play into that? Is it just like if my student finished a community schools program the end of this week, then they'd be a priority for the fall, or does community school summer programming play into that priority? Does that make sense, that question?
No, the summer doesn't affect the enrollment for the fall.
Okay.
Not connected.
Can I ask a follow-up? This might be
go ahead.
through the chair to the assistant superintendent for instruction, or academics, sorry. Is it possible next year to have like the plan for summer programs posted earlier or like made public earlier, especially summer school? It's a request.
Through the chair. Absolutely. I will say that I tangentially oversaw the process this year. So I wasn't, fully leading this process. That said, I can absolutely work with Rosanna, her team, Janae, who supported a lot of the summer work this summer. And I'm assuming we'll probably think deeply about, as the summer goes, we'll probably have some reflection conversations, timeline being one of them, to think about how we can be more successful for next year. So yes. Is there a specific timeline within there that kind of comes to mind? Or, I mean, in our reflection, we can also address that, but it would...
Sure, specifically, I mean, I think that I apologize if I like attempted to usurp your power by directing it to Dr. Boston Davis. I think it was in part because what I heard was families who found out their kids were qualified, I don't know the right term, for summer school, or were eligible for slots for summer school, like found out they had already made plans, and I heard that from a lot of people all over the city. And so that's why I directed it to you specifically, is it's a summer school thing, because these are families that, had they not already paid a lot of money for other programs, would have been really happy to have their kids in summer school, but aren't going to do that. So that's where the root of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Through the chair. Thank you for that point of clarity. And I think this was definitely on our radar, certainly on Ruth Santos, director of SFLC. She named that very concern in our initial summer planning meetings, December, January, as something to keep in mind of how are we letting families know when students are eligible for some of the refer-only programs, so they can make their plans in that way. So I definitely think it was on, and Rosanna, please, I know that you were a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I think the plan for summer school was still in planning mode this year, because it was a change of provider and curriculum. And once that was finalized, the wheels went in motion, and the directors worked quickly to send out those referrals and so on. But what I've seen, my part of being involved in this process for the first time this year in this role, I did see that I think next year it will be announced earlier. If we have the same curriculum and provider, then that shouldn't be an issue. That was our concern as well, because we do the enrollment for these other programs, and we didn't want to see the students start disenrolling. And so I don't know about other programs outside of Somerville Public Schools or our city programs. We were flexible and did, you could unenroll before June 1st, because we realized that would happen, but we can't. We know that some summer camp providers want to know in, April, you have to make that commitment and pay. We're more flexible within the city on that, but that's definitely a goal to have those programs. And again, like Dr. Jessica Boston Davis said, that was brought up in the beginning as a concern.
Thank you, that's helpful. And through the chair, just to add a couple of more kind of context based on that. So we are partnering with the Hill for Literacy for summer session this summer, which will provide the educators and the paraprofessionals who are leading our programs PD. They also get an additional stipend for getting trained, and so it's kind of twofold in that they are receiving PD after after kind of the school hours, and then they can apply those strategies that we've learned in the school year coming up. So that's kind of the new things. And I will just name, I think this is a really great piece of feedback, and I think it's something that we have to consider going forward. There's also, it's tough because as a parent myself, I know the summer conversations start in January, you know, the wait lists open in January and you're trying to refresh and get on and kind of figure out what your options are. And some of our referral programs, we really want to use the data and recommendations from educators from assessment cycles that might happen later in the school year. And so that's for us to kind of figure out what to do with that dilemma, whether we reassess the way in which we recommend students, or perhaps there's a way in January, say, that can determine whether this student would likely be a candidate, and therefore we can notify parents. So I just wanted to name that dilemma, but I do recognize that's an issue for us to kind of look deeply into, so I appreciate the feedback.
I have Ms. Patone and then Mr. Green. Oh, Laura, your mic's not on.
Blah, blah, blah. No, just kidding. I just, 2-second compliment to the superintendent, the fact that we're going to do an assessment, and that's great. Or reflecting on and supporting what Dr. Phillips had said about, you know, I'm respecting the educators' concerns about the treatment of classrooms as well as having to have a place to work, but at the same time, we have needs. And we have, if we can, it's a public space, and we need to figure out how to resolve this in a way that we can serve our families, acknowledging that it's also challenging to hire good staff. And so I also wanted to compliment this team that, you know, the level of complexity as well as the level of nuance in terms of what you're looking for. I mean, we've really, again, we've evolved as a district in such a strong way. So I'm just really excited to hear the way that you guys speak about what you're looking for in staff. And it's not about, you know, just putting a person in that place. It's trying to find the right person. So I had 2 questions, and you might not be able to answer them. One, families asked me about the timing of announcements and when they get spots. So I've had families say, one school found out one week and another school found out the other week, and I guess it causes a lot of agita. So that's the first question, and it's not a criticism, it's just feedback. And the second question, this is probably to the superintendent, I'm curious of how, I know that we've made some different decisions about the breakthrough program, and that wasn't introduced here. I know that's probably not under your umbrella or aegis, but I think we should be public about whatever changes we're going to pursue, particularly, you know, there's about 70 7th and 8th graders every year that we're doing that very intensive sober programming, and have we gotten to ourselves to a point where we've come with a replacement program? And I understand that it's not going to happen overnight, and I think that they're serving us this summer, but you know, it was brought up in the beginning and then it was kind of not anymore. So I want to be public about, at least as a school committee member, we've invested a lot of money in that. And so this is an opportunity to speak to it. So I apologize that I shoved 2 questions in, but.
Did you want to answer the first question first?
Sure.
About the timing of?
So the timing was actually a week. In a week, we did 8 elementary schools. And the process is one by one. So it is, you know, and we were all involved, all the team involved, trying to figure out, is this a 1 or is this a 2? You know, we were trying to really dig into how we were, you know, how do you say it, assigning the numbers for every family. And that took more time than what we can, you know, we just have certain amount of hours in the day, and one person, it's a system that unfortunately is one by one, and we need to check, and then if we have a doubt, we're like, wait, is this student was with us before or wasn't? You know, all this information. So, but all the confirmations went in the same week. So maybe these families didn't see the email until next week or something, but it wasn't
the same week.
And then I don't know if you guys wanted to respond about breakthrough or take that back.
Thank you, through the chair. So I think my recommendation would be to provide a memo for the committee next week, given there's a number of members of our team that have worked on this. But I think the point is a good one. I can give a quick high level, is that are in constant evaluation of our programming, and in order, to your very point, to be fiscally responsible and think about impact, we wanted to think deeply about our relationship with Breakthrough, and thought with feedback from our different community members that this might be a time in which we end our relationship. We will have summer programming with Breakthrough, and I think that a memo can give a lot more details from members of the team than I have right now, but that's kind of a high-level overview.
Great, thank you. I had Mr. Green.
Yes. To Dr. Ackerman's comments, I 100% agree. Like, every family who has had the January struggle knows the January rush for summer programming. But I also want to remind us all, and be sure that as we just think of ways to handle that we're mindful that for our most vulnerable families, the difference between January and June, as far as where you are in life, what your needs would be, and other things, is vast. And asking those families to be committed in January probably doesn't meet their needs adequately. So we need to figure out some way to create space for the families that do have to make decisions in January, and the families that don't know that, and frankly couldn't afford other options anyway, to be able to sign up closer to the last minute.
Dr. Phillips?
I'm sorry to have so many comments. I could talk all day about out-of-school time programming. Dr. Boston Davis's comments about Breakthrough reminded me to ask, we know that high-quality out-of-school time programs make a difference for kids, and low-quality programs don't, and sometimes have negative impacts. And we know that intensity and duration really matter in terms of how often are kids showing up. I'm wondering, could we share maybe at next year's presentation about out-of-school time programming, or somewhere along the way, like, what's the attendance rate at these different programs? And what do we know about their quality? Like, I know it was really hard to figure out how many kids were actually attending Breakthrough, which was part of that decision. I'd love to know that for the rest of our programs.
Great. Seeing no new questions, I think we can send you on our way and have our next presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to have Chris Flynn come to the podium, please. We have the Early Release Wednesday.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. Great job, you guys. I'm going to be speaking to something related to their work, what's happening with our teachers on those Early Release Wednesdays. They were speaking about what's going on with our students on those Early Release Wednesdays, but they're definitely intertwined. So I'm going to tell you about the last 6 months that I've helped to lead the Common Planning Time implementation team. And Erica, if you could advance to the next slide. Who were we? We were 21 educators, a mix of 10 Unit A teachers. We had 2 Unit C paras, 4 SAA administrators, 4 non-unit admins, and we had a representative from out-of-school time as well. So a really broad group of folks and all the stakeholder groups. When did we meet? About twice a month since January. We would meet after school for a couple hours for each session, and our overall objective of this entire time was to craft an implementation plan in order to ensure a successful rollout of the new CPT initiative for next year. So, when we first came together, we were like, this is a big project. There's a lot of facets, and we need to think about everything that goes into managing complex change. Communicating the vision, ensuring that our people have the skills to do it, understanding the incentive to making this big change, making sure our people have the resources, and then building the action plan itself. That's how you get to a big change, and avoiding any of those pitfalls that are blacked out there in that graphic. People really resonated with this, and this sort of framed how we planned our time together. Next slide, please. We also believed that we needed to report out periodically to an advisory group to give them feedback on, or to gather feedback rather, on our progress. So we had a group of about 30 educators, teachers, admin, paras, SEU leadership, where we reported out our progress. Here's where we are now. Here's the work we've been completing so far. What feedback do you have for us? What blind spots do we have? And again, this was a big picture was about transparency and inviting as many voices into this process as possible. So between those two groups, we had upwards of 50 educators with their hands on the plan. So after we did a little bit of team building, like you need to do on any new team, and thinking about grounding our work in that big managing complex change sort of matrix, we decided to subdivide into working groups, identifying 3 big areas that we needed to tackle, all of which have adaptive components, but also have very technical components for this big change to happen. So people were divided into a communications subcommittee, a skills and resources subcommittee, and a logistics subcommittee. And each of those had a representative group of different individuals. So let me speak to you a little bit about sort of the actions and products that came out of each of these groups. I'm distilling 6 months of a lot of work into like 1 slide per, so I'm doing it as best as I can to keep this going. But right out of the gate, the communications team created a CPT FAQ document, a simple 1-pager that we could distribute and did to all K-8 staff. We had representatives from every school named on that document as well. So if you have questions and you want to talk to somebody in person, go to them. If they can't answer it, come to me. We led multiple intro to CPT PD sessions to different staff groups and schools. We also did talk to them about there's going to be an increased demand for classroom space because of this change, and be ready to be sharing your classroom after school. So there is a bit of a foot in the proverbial and literal door there for what teachers are expecting for next year, and their rooms having some increased usage possibly. The communications group hosted 3 optional Zoom info sessions. We decided that this was way too big and complex a thing to send email blasts about. We wanted to avoid confusion, so we held in-person or via Zoom events. We created some informational flyers for recruiting leaders of the Common Planning Time sessions. We made a master calendar, mapping out what's going to be happening on every Wednesday CPT afternoon. That was a puzzle that took many hours. We've talked with principals about direct messaging and recruitment of Common Planning Time leaders. We asked that they all speak to their staff at the June 5th at school-based PD this week, or this past week. And this week, I am going to finally be blasting not every bit of info, but a digestible amount of info with some basic things about what team you're going to be on, what the calendar will be, who the leader might be of your group if we have that information ready. But one recommendation that came out of communications group was that we need to have time face-to-face or via Zoom into every pre-K to 8 school in the fall to launch the year. Because right now, we can communicate all we want, but teachers in June are closing down shop, resting their brains and their hearts, and it's not the time to bombard with info. So that was a recommendation that came out of communications. Next slide, please. The logistics team, the real sort of type A folks who are like, give me a spreadsheet, I want to make a plan, I want to go, and those folks signed up for that group. They made it a master spreadsheet of all the school's teams, the district teams, whether they're art teachers or grade 4 teachers or speech and language pathologists. They went through our master staffing plan that was redacted of names, but to just figure out how many teachers would be in each group. We don't want giant groups, we don't want tiny groups. And they started thinking about room numbers and identifying that. This team's spreadsheet was reviewed multiple times by principals. They played with it because they know their schools better, than this team necessarily did. We went to multiple schools to present what we believe might make sense for common planning teams, and different groups gave us feedback, whether they were the specialists who were sort of in a unique role because they're singletons in their school, and it's like, what team do I really belong on in my school? How is that going to work? Or a dean of students, for example, or a counselor educator. So we got a lot of feedback there. Again, I mentioned we're working with out-of-school time to map after-school room availability, and to my knowledge, there isn't anything in the contract that says we cannot use rooms, and I think this messaging that went out to all the groups that we talked with was, this is a worthy trade-off. This is a really great thing that we're getting for you folks, that we're going to have this collective efficacy happening in these sessions, and it's worth giving up your after-school room time for. It's just, and sort of working that messaging in. We are, rather than just assigning random rooms, we decided that we would have the teams default to whomever the common planning time leader is hired to lead a respective team, that they will get to host. Good for you. You're leading the team, you're taking on a risk, you're taking on some leadership, you've got a plan for your sessions, you can host it, so you don't have to travel or move around. Finally, we had this team develop sample schedules for the 8:20 to 1 o'clock dismissal. It required some moving of pieces, and we got all the principals together there so that they could have their schedules ready for the fall. Because that was a big piece of feedback. The teachers wanted to know, what's my Wednesday day going to look like? I'm really excited about the afternoon, but this new 8:20 to 1 o'clock day, what's that? So we delivered on that. Next slide, the training and resources team was sort of two that merged into one. But after doing a lot of research, we had members go off and take a training with Research for Better Teaching, a nonprofit based out of Acton, and they run Studying Skillful Teaching. We do a lot of partnering with them. Folks took that training to mine it for some resources or ideas. Some of our members enrolled in this Leading Teacher Teams, Promoting Growth Through Effective Collaboration through the Harvard Graduate School of Ed, and that was an asynchronous course. And after bringing the groups back together, the overwhelming feedback, not only from the people who took the course, but from the CPT advisory to whom we presented, was that to scale this up quickly and get as many people trained as quickly as possible, that an asynchronous Harvard course would be the model to go with, because people's summer schedules are all over the place, and to have a live training that you must attend to have this position would be too rigid and could be limiting. So we wanted to maximize the number of people who could take the course. So we've been in partnership with them, talking about how they can customize the course for our needs, and they are happily doing so. We're talking future partnership beyond the initial rollout, considering ways in which they could perhaps study us. It's a really interesting experiment. We have an entire district moving from 0 to a huge amount of common planning time, and Harvard has quite a few resources, and I was like, why not give us a few doctoral students, and you can study us, and they can help us, and they can help us research. So we're talking about those ideas. This group also created a leader guide and a Google Classroom that sort of dovetails with each week's module in the Harvard training. How do you establish a team in the first place? Because we can't just say, poof, you're a team, right? Go commonly plan now. That would be a recipe for disaster. It has to be a very deliberate, structured thing, but led by teachers. So how do you build a team? What's different about leading adults versus kids? There's a lot in common, but there's different things too. How to facilitate a meeting effectively, what kind of protocols you should use, how to promote discussion, how to solve common challenges, and what happens if the team isn't playing nice? Like how do we manage conflict on a team? So the guide, which is linked in there, and you can take a look at it, sort of has resources and ideas that go along with each of those modules. Next slide, please. I'm almost done. So for next year, we also envision having sort of quarterly full group summits, we decided to call them, throughout the year, wherein we'll bring all of our CPT leaders together quarterly. We can gather feedback in real time. How are things going? What's not going well? Building a community of educator leaders. not unlike how we do for our mentors. We bring them together quarterly each year to sort of do some group activities. We believe that each CPT leader ought to have a go-to administrator who has had lots of experience leading adults and leading teams, somebody who's not their evaluator, but someone they can go to for support and say, you know, here's my agenda, what do you think? Is this what we need to do? Or here's my trajectory for the next 4 meetings. Does this make sense in your experience? And then we also are going to bolster this with offering lots of things in the Choice PD catalog that go along with implementing common planning time well. So maybe some discrete 6-hour offerings on how do you write objectives and use success criteria? How do we look at student work? Or how do I use formative assessments to inform my decisions, right? So very specific things that can be brought into any CPT. And last recommendation this group made was a continuation or the creation of some sort of ongoing advisory group that could make some decisions about and progress monitoring about how things are going next year. And that is what that pair of teams that merged together has worked on and produced so far. And I'm so grateful for this group, just a fabulous group of educators. They all are listed, and I wanted to at least make sure they got a visual sort of shout out because they worked really hard. The team was super collaborative. I watched second and first year educators blossom and take on real district-wide leadership, and I'm so proud of the work they did and to be part of that group. And that's what I've got for you. So,
Great.
Any questions?
Thank you so much. I have Dr. Ackerman, then Dr. Phillips, and then Mr. Green.
Thank you. I thank you for this. I'm very excited as a researcher. I'm stoked that there are researchers supporting, helping, training. I just want to note that the one thing that I'm very excited about Common Planning Time and the outcomes it will bring to our students, it was, I will say for myself, for our students who already have like a truncated, intense day, that we took another 5 minutes of learning time away from them. I want to be sure that this is worth it. So I'm just laying it out there. I look forward to seeing a year from now how it's going, 2 years, 3 years, and I want to note that I really look forward to seeing those data.
So yes, the implementation team's purview wasn't really to figure out like what data points would indicate success or not, but the academic cabinet, which has Dr. Boston Davis, myself, K-8 curriculum directors, we're having lots of conversations about what are the data points that we want to see or the expectations of growth that we want to see. So we should have specific sort of targeted goals to share with the group soon.
Great. Dr. Phillips and then Mr. Green.
Thanks, through you, Chair. Kind of a follow-up to that. You guys have done a phenomenal job building out the infrastructure for this huge change in the district, so congratulations.
Thanks.
And I'd love to learn more about how you're thinking about the content of what folks will be doing during their common planning time.
Sure. Take a look at that, that leadership guide that the team has made. So it's not professional development, and it's not owned by teachers or by admin. It's a collaborative time and space, so we do want the leader to have some opportunity to think about what scope and sequence of the 10 meetings might make sense for that team's goal. We do have a few sample, like 10 meeting full year, like scope and sequence. What might make sense if this is your type of goal, or what might make sense for each meeting to do. We also suggested, the first meeting after the iReady assessment in the fall ought to be a data meeting where you come together and you look at outcomes and you think about. So we're trying to have some structure and suggested menu of activities that are logically connected without it being, do this. There's a balance I think we're trying to hopefully strike out of the gate, if that makes sense and answers your question. Okay.
And I apologize if I missed this somewhere, but approximately how many teachers, admin are going to be in each sort of group doing whatever it is they're doing?
So the school-based teams, and there'll be up to 8 school-based teams per school, will have around 8 to 10 people per team. The district teams are going to be larger. So, for example, I think there's 24 third grade teachers. One way we're thinking about the size of those district teams is not only having a CPT leader lead that group, but strategically assigning one of our coaches into each of those grade levels based on the new work or curriculum that grade is rolling out next year. So for example, the illustrative math that's coming out in 3 to 5, putting a few math coaches in grades 3, 4, and 5, and at least having a couple of sort of facilitator folks in each of those larger groups where they can also subdivide into smaller, but nothing larger than 25 for those district teams, which is large, but again, with 2 facilitators, I've taught 25 kid classrooms, and you know, it's doable.
Great, thank you. Mr. Green, and then Ms. Patone.
Actually, Dr. Ackerman and Dr. Phillips got to my questions, so I'm good.
Okay. Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to echo what my colleagues have said. Obviously, this has been a huge lift, and it's clear how excited you are, and I'm sure how excited the common planning time leaders are. And you guys have thought a lot about developing this leadership in our educators, which is super exciting. I guess my question is about, you mentioned the PD catalog. What are your thoughts about, you know, we're not going to have the same leaders every year. And so you're doing this huge push this year to have this leadership training. Is this something going to be offered to educators every year as they become new common planning time leaders? So like I said, if you know there's one at the whatever school and they do it for 2 years, because I can't imagine people are, maybe somebody will be doing this for 20 years, but I don't think so. It's a very deep investment of time and energy, and I also think it's a benefit to the district that we cycle through different people through this opportunity. So just thinking about how you're going to continue to maintain this fresh and keep this quality up high.
So I think we have certainly the internal capacity to make our own in-house training. Certainly we've got lots of people who've led teacher teams in all sorts of different ways. The reason why we were doing the Harvard one for this year is because of the volume. We could say, we got 80 people and we need them trained. And they're like, great, sign them up and we'll tweak the course for you. I think going forward, what might make sense, and there's sort of a precedent, the way we train our mentors for our new teachers, we have an annual teacher mentor training. It's a 12-hour training, and we just continuously add to the bench, so to speak, and make that pool as deep as possible. But out of the gate, I think we really needed to make the pool humongous quickly. And then going forward, the choice PD modules, for example, that we want to have in the catalog for next year could be pieces of a district training for CPT leaders. Like, how do I lead groups? How do I look at student work? So I don't know what the next iteration would be, but I think if we have a baseline of 80 folks next year and we could run a nice big training in that big room at the high school, 40 folks, then we could build out that bench and do it internally and not have to pay Harvard. But yes, I'm thinking a lot about that as well.
I mean, whatever makes sense.
Yeah.
It's always my thing, but about how do we keep this sustainable, and then we continue to develop that talent so that it doesn't, it's amazing, and then it kind of, thank you.
I mean, I also envision not unlike the mentoring program, we have 3 teacher leaders who are the mentor coordinators. They don't mentor per se, but they run the trainings in collaboration with me. They oversee partnering, you know, they are another voice for teachers to go talk to. I see a potential stipended role as being like a CPT coordinator. And I've already got a few people from this team who are like performing that role right now, and they're fabulous, and they're gonna be helping me run we're doing an in-person session this Thursday to sort of kick off. Then they go off and do their asynchronous work over the 6 weeks, and then we're gonna come together for a few hours the first day of school to practice some of the things, build your first meeting agenda so that you're set in August for your first CPT session that happens in September. So there's a lot of, again, I think some internal capacity that we want to just continue to build.
Great. If there are no further questions.
Just through the chair. Chris, thank you. Thank you very much. This is very intentional. We know that the pace of change and improvement is also tightly related to the capacity that educators have to reflect on their own practice, thinking about the practice, redo their teaching and their lessons. So I love some of the responses around that, like centering the needs of the educators as we reflect on practice. So I think that's a never-ending practice, and if we stick with that and also being reflected on the impact, I am really excited, and I know you have been at the center of creating the guardrails for this, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, really excited.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Carmona, there more to your report.
Thank you. Through the chair, we have a report, Emily Department update from Director Metropolis, Emily Director. So it's in your packet. I don't know if you have taken a look at it. A couple of things that I'll highlight from it is that there's a large number of our students that are the composition of the Emily demographics. So 26% of our students are Emily students. I don't know if you noticed in the document that it's all about asset learning and asset-based instruction. 3 things she highlighted in this document, which I think are worth pointing out, is one is the emphasis on research-based programs, and I know that she has, the director has come multiple times to say, hey, let's look at this program. This is the program we're investing in because it's research-based. So there's a significant emphasis on making sure that we are informing our practices. The second piece is around professional development for the MLE educators, and the third one is around making sure we collaborate with families. And again, all through an asset-based approach. There are more things in here that I think you can take a look, and then you can ask if you have any questions. But just one little data point. I know there's a new program called the GOLD program. I know that is for students who are over age and under-credited. I believe that we graduated more students than we have had in a cycle of 2 or 3 years in 1 year. Part of that is also some of the intentionality of the design that we have, and also the folks we have assigned to the program. But I love the idea of looking in terms of outcomes, and I think that that's one of the things that we get from the director, and her emphasis is all about the outcomes. So really excited that she kind of provided this information here. So please review it, and if you have a question or if you have a concern, just let me know.
Dr. Ackman?
Thank you. Through the chair, it is my understanding that we have our core languages, and that I think the district has done a great job increasingly of reaching students in our core languages. I'm curious, I didn't see it in here. I just would love to understand how we support the non-core languages, and also how they're decided, because as certain populations are coming in, I know there's an Emirati population at Assembly, but that's not district-wide, that's at one school. And it doesn't have to be a right now thing, but I would love to sort of understand how decisions are made about language priority, and then how we reassess as it happens. Does that make sense?
Yes, this is a great question. Through the chair. I don't have that data, but it is a great question, and I know we set aside money in our budget to address the issue of translation for Arabic language. But the question, one of the questions that piggybacks on that one is, I know we have a program at the East, and one of the questions that came out the other day was how do we advertise that? How do we make it known that we have a bilingual program in a two-way program in our system, and how is it celebrated? Along the same lines is, what is happening in terms of the demographics of the number of students who come in and we continue to serve regardless of the needs. So those are great numbers. I don't have them with me, but that's a good question.
Thank you, through the chair, and thank you for the question. Can I ask, as a point of clarity, do you mean, I heard you ask how are the target languages determined? Is that right? Okay, so. Yes, so one thing that I can speak to is that the Paulina and her team, Director Metropolis and her team, do a really great job of regularly checking in on data, and they send out reports even to a few members. I wonder if we can even include that in this, where they have the breakdown of languages spoken, the population, the percentage of all MLE students, and what languages they speak. So they do a really great job, to your point, Superintendent Carmona, about centering the outcomes in the data, of regularly evaluating that. I don't think those numbers made it into this memo, and that could have been helpful to add some context. But I can definitely ask to include the fourth quarter.
Yeah, we have, I mean, my one-to-ones with her, she always brings the breakdown of where are the different languages and how we're responding to them. I mean, through the budget process, there's not, if we reach certain numbers, she will be the first one knocking at the door saying, you know, we need to really adjust. So that is a fluid process, and it will be easy to get you that information.
All right, thank you. Through the chair, I mean, for me, you know, to what I've heard both the superintendent, assistant superintendent say is, you know, like, we want it to be systems and not people, and Paulina is indeed amazing, but I want to make sure, should something happen, that keeps going. And so and to me, it doesn't need to be in next week's packet, but as next time we have a version of this, which is amazing, if we could have that context, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Ms. Parrish.
That was loud, sorry. Dr. Ackman's question, and I think maybe the response made me wonder, and again, this is, I'm sure, not a data point that anyone has access to right now, but something that I'd be curious about in the future, is whether we see differences in how long it takes students to skill out of special programming based on the languages that they speak. So, you know, are we better at teaching students whose first language is Spanish or Haitian Creole or Swahili? I don't know. I would be curious about that, because that might give us clues about what we might be able to do differently or better.
Through the chair, I know that one initiative that we had that is coming in, is in the pipeline, is to make sure that our students get integrated, especially in the early grades, pre-K and K, get integrated in the classrooms. Students who are, and so I know that so there was a concern in some degree, and some teachers were wondering if they had the tools to do that. But if you think about it, in the early grades, students, developmental growth of language is, you know, they catch it faster, and also they're similar to their peers' growth. So, but that's a change in terms of, like, how do we see the impact of how some of the trajectory of the language development takes place for many kids. As to the language specifically, there are other factors that you know, there's, you know, the relationship of the language versus the power of the other languages. So there's more to it, but and I don't know how easy it would be to determine the rate of improvement, to separate that from other factors that will determine how a child progresses in education. But it's a great question.
Great, thank you. Before we continue with the personnel report, if it's okay with you, can we take things out of order? I know we have Ms. Kirsten here. I don't necessarily want to keep her here longer than we need to. So I suggest we take things out of order and take up the new business item C, which is the Somerville Public Schools Policy Manual. I will have Ms. Parrish give us some context, and then we can ask Ms. Kirsten clarifying questions as needed. Ms. Parrish.
So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we did pass out of rules not only the separate policy about attendance and attending protests, but also the much larger document, which is the more comprehensive handbook revisions. Ms. Kirsten provided a slideshow sort of summarizing those changes. There is also a document that, like a spreadsheet that has the changes sort of summarized, the reason for the change. Thank you. And the full handbook document is, if it's not in tonight's folder, it's in the rules folder. I don't remember. So, you know, please take your time to review them. I know it's a lot, but the team at the high school has put a ton of work into this over the past year. And Ms. Kirsten is here. If you do have specific questions, because you've already had a chance to review them, or you heard me read the excused absence for protest recommendations or revisions, I'm offering the opportunity.
Great. Mr. Green.
Thank you, through you. First, I want to thank Ms. Kirsten for what is clearly a lot of difficult, thoughtful work. I also, I have some questions about the policy that I will get to in a second, but I want to state for the record that I know how long you've been working on this. I know this is in fact a year's worth of effort, and despite perhaps reckless rhetoric that has to some degree clouded that work, I know that you were coming from a sincere place of trying to address the fact that Somerville High, like many schools since the return to in-person learning, has seen a spike in chronic absenteeism. And so I thank you for your efforts, and I want to make sure that I happily vouch for the integrity of your work. That said, I would love some data at our next meeting about how many, over the last, I'll say, if you have it since we returned to in-person learning, but at least for this year and last year, data on how many students have how many excused absences for protests, and how many students would have, this year especially, would have gone over 4 excused this year. Just so we have some sense of the scope of the situation.
I just want to clarify one thing, and I don't know if I'm out of turn here, that I've separated out the proposals. There's 2 proposals to the updates on the handbook to vote on. One is a huge body of work that's really just trying to bring our handbook in line with current law and practice, and then we separated the one out about guidelines on excusing absences for protests, because I want to separate those 2 issues. I also want to acknowledge Marie Foreman. She's our assistant principal team leader this year, who really did the bulk of the work and has the incredible brain to pay attention to the details and the legal pieces. So I'm getting some credit for this, but really the bulk of the credit should go for there. To answer your question, even without looking at the data, there were only 3 student walkouts this year. So I mean, I would have to go back and look at how many students, how many unexcused absences they had in addition to those 3. But given that I believe they were in I think there were 2 in the second quarter and 1 in the fourth quarter. I don't think anybody would have, that shouldn't have been a tipping point to put someone over they're allowed 5 unexcused absences per quarter.
Just to clarify my request, I thought thank you for that answer. Yeah. That tells us a lot. But I just want to know, if we just look at excused absences for protests, how many absences are we talking about last year and this year, and cover how many students?
Like total students?
Yeah.
That will be very difficult for me to pull out, to parse out from, because it's not daily absences, it's from classes. So it would be very, very difficult for me to pull out that data for you.
Fair enough, thank you.
I have Ms. Patone and then Dr. Ackman.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I want to compliment the team that worked on this. This new proposal, specifically the guidelines to excuse participation in protests, this was created in collaboration with students. So this wasn't something that has been directed by the administration kind of in there, how do we reduce attendance issues, but they sat down and had real conversations with students about how do we come up with a compromise, how do we balance and encourage students to express themselves and do the good work and do the good learning that hopefully they will have in this process without necessarily having it completely open-ended. So I think it's really important to make sure that everyone understands that this wasn't administration sitting down and saying we're going to clamp down and allow no one to do anything. The fact that there's going to be proposed, if we decide to pass this, for unexcused absences, and this is a policy for excused that I don't know. I mean, I did a little research. I didn't find anything like this. There's one state, I think it's Virginia, that has 1 excused absence state level for students. So in some ways, this is cutting edge, and I think it also, it creates some clarity, it creates some accountability, and it also creates this opportunity to engage with parents, because parents are going to be having to, if we choose to pass this, to approve the absences, giving the permission, and also the opportunity to reflect. So it is taking something that was kind of open-ended, that was very, very well intended, and making it much more accountable and specific, and hopefully giving a chance for more learning for the students. But again, I just want to emphasize and thank the administration for doing this work in collaboration with students.
Dr. Ackman and then Mr. Green.
Thank you. Through the chair, I want to echo my colleagues' sentiments. This is an impressive amount of work. I'm curious, this is sort of for the purposes of my understanding for voting. I'm a big fan of color coding. I'm a big fan of your color coding. Made it very clear. Or your
Marie's, I want to give Marie credit. Marie Foreman's color coding.
Right,
She did an amazing
Marie's
job.
color coding, chef's kiss. But I am looking to understand how we, as the people voting this out, are supposed to understand what is called light blue still under review.
Oh, I can update that for you. I'm sorry. Some of those are just like, sorry, if they were light blue under review, then they're just staying as they are, because we didn't get updates to them by our deadline, so I should change that on there. The light blue will just stay as is.
Okay, so to be very clear, then anything that is light blue, there are no proposed changes to?
There are no proposed changes. There were just a couple people we were waiting to hear back from, or I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, or just things we were waiting on. But I don't think, just those, if I'm recalling correctly, and I apologize, I don't have all of them at my fingertips, Marie I think does, we were just sort of asking certain people, is what's in the handbook actually current practice? But if I recall correctly, nothing that's in light blue is this big legal issue or significant issue, and if I'm wrong, I will go back and double check that.
That's great. You've answered my question.
But we should have changed that before the final presentation. The light blue, we're just going to leave as is.
Mr. Green? And then Dr. Phillips.
Thank you, again, through you. Can you remind me the current status of the extended campus policy, and like what does that entail? Who's it cover, and what parental permissions are needed?
Yeah, so for the extended lunch policy, and I might need some help from the rules subcommittee, that got approved into the handbook in the fall, and because it's in the handbook, and then because it's just the period of lunch, we do not require specific parent permission for at lunch. At lunch, the students are allowed to go in walking distance. You know, they can't take vehicles to get their lunch, and they need to be back by the time. So that does not require specific parent permission on that. It's called extended lunch, extended campus lunch. It's really late. Yeah. Whatever it's called. Yeah.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. Through you to our lawyer, actually. You know, the concern about like liability for students off campus has come up in this discussion, in the presentation, et cetera. I would love to know, does that apply to extended campus? And if so, is that something we should talk about? And if not, why not? Right, that's what I'm saying, through you to our lawyer. This is the question.
Yeah, but we had it reviewed by our lawyer also, and I just remember that, I can't remember the details, it was a while ago, but the language we have in there, sort of notifying parents that this is our policy, that we let kids go out for lunch, was enough, in her opinion, to sort of cover us, that it then becomes a decision between the student and the parent whether they leave the campus for lunch. Our data is showing that most students do not. We're still serving about 800 to 900 lunches a day from our cafeteria, so the vast majority of students are not leaving campus for lunch.
Dr. Phillips?
My request for the legal question about the parental permission for campus leaving remains.
You can double check that before we vote on this next week. Dr. Phillips?
Thanks. Through you, Chair. I really appreciate all the work you and your team have done to update the handbook, and I really don't want to micromanage you on this. I have a question, though, about the change on page, looks like 66, where we have a line about security cameras being installed at the high school. I didn't see anywhere similar notification that we have vape detectors and that we have Guardian installed at the high school, and I was wondering if we needed to do that in the same place, or if it was elsewhere and I missed it?
It is not elsewhere. That is an excellent point. We know legally when there are security cameras in use that we need to do notifications. I do not know legally if we need to do vape detectors or the Guardian as well. I know legally we have to let people know if we are using security cameras. But we did not add that. I didn't consider that.
I'm happy to ask our lawyer that as well when I ask about the extended lunch policy. It was vape detectors and you listed something else? Okay.
It's the shot
Like
detector.
the shot spotter?
Okay. I'm happy to do that. Mr. Green?
For you, to Ms. Kirsten, even if it's not legally required, would you have a problem putting it in the handbook? Just for the purpose of transparency?
We could, that is something we can easily add that to the handbook, and I don't know what the rules are for first and second reading, but that is something we can easily add just to notify that those are, yeah, those aren't policies or guidelines, or they're just sort of notifying everybody, so we could easily add those. I can easily add those.
Other questions or comments?
Could I just say, through the chair, I know that the community has asked about the timing of this, and I just want to be forthcoming. When I first even got to the job and I met Alicia, Principal Kirsten, the first thing that she came to me was, let's look at the handbook, and let's look at all the things that we need to adjust, including the protest was one of those. So this has been a long question that the timing, I understand the timing. The optics, I understand the optics. But I want to be as forthcoming as possible. This has nothing to do with the actual political developments that we face right now. This is something that happened a while ago. If it doesn't happen, what happens is that if we don't bring the handbook right now, we'll remain with those things that have to be adjusted in the handbook, and that is not right for the community that has been asking for this for a while. And so I just wanted to share that with you, that there was no intentionality to this, except for the fact that this has been something that has been in the mind of the high school to make sure that we have a safer system for all our kids.
And if I may add on to that, that actually stems, looking at the protest, I don't know if it's a policy or a guideline specifically. We believe that showed up in the handbook around the time of this mass student demonstrations around gun violence, which was, I don't remember the exact year, but I know I was in the mods, and I believe it got added. But it's been on our minds because that group of students, Admirable did a lot of amazing work, but they also did Walkout Wednesdays, which were extremely disruptive and sort of difficult to manage for the school. So we were looking for something that would both, we are in support. I'm the former social studies chair. I'm all for students, civic participation, and yet the way that it was stated, such a blanket statement with no limit on how many, any kind of parent permission or parent or guardian permission or any kind of guidelines or anything about it, caused part of the reason, Andre, I can't pull that data so easily is that when you have these walkouts, hundreds of students walk out. It's very difficult for us to tell who left, who's there, very difficult to manage, and so we wanted to find a way to balance that. I also do want to, so the timing comes from many years ago, and again, I'm not blind to how it lands and the optics and the strong, very valid feelings that people are experiencing right now. But I'm also just trying to make it way we can support our students, but also make it manageable for the school as well to support what we need to do for student safety and sort of organization and not disrupting our learning process.
Mr. Green, did you have another
I was just going to say it was 2018. It was...
2019.
It was then Superintendent Skipper and then Principal...
Lagambina?
Yes, I didn't want to say Sibby, and I was like playing it.
Principal Sibby, that works.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Phillips?
It strikes me that we're probably only really going to use the new protest policy if it's passed when there are movements happening and there are hundreds of kids walking out, and I'm just wondering, how are you thinking about the staff time needed to review all of those protest forms and all that documentation? How's that going to work?
Better than it does now, a lot better than it does now. We have 4 secretaries, our community secretaries, who are the ones that parents and guardians call into or email into. So the way we're envisioning it now is that it could even be retroactive, right? A parent calling or emailing in afterwards. And this is all the students, by the way. The part about the educational piece is the students were listening to us trying to figure out how to balance, 200 kids walk out, 300 go to the protest. It'll probably be a Google form, which will populate a spreadsheet, which we can alphabetize and be very easy for the staff to review and the community staff. I do also want to point out that part of the reason we started with it making it unexcused is that per our current policy, students get 5 unexcused absences per quarter with no penalty. So in theory, even though it's stated as excused, students actually, if you have no other unexcused absences, could protest 20 days a year with no penalty to their grade or nothing. And so while we're specifically naming protests for these 4 with the educational component, if, for example, there's a student who really wants to protest and their parent won't let them go, it doesn't actually penalize them to go because we allow 5 unexcused absences per quarter.
Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, this will be on our agenda for next Monday.
And we can add, I just want to point of clarification, we can just add those 2 lines about notification about the Guardian system and the vape detectors. Okay.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, and now, Dr. Carmona, the rest of your report.
Thank you. So we'll do some shout-outs that Dr. Jessica Boston Davis will share with the community. It's, things that have happened in the district. Educators have emailed me and said, hey, can you please recognize the students or recognize adults? So I feel that I will be remiss not to share that great news from our community.
Thank you, through the chair. So congratulations to all the 2024 scholarship recipients. We have 147 SHS seniors who won scholarships at the SHS Scholarship Award Night. 397,460 $460 were awarded in scholarships.
400,000.
Thank you. Close to $400,000. Thank you.
You're the one with the MBA.
The hour is late. Thank you very much, Superintendent Carmona, for that. 8 students won the Somerville Municipal Scholarship. 1 senior won the prestigious Questbridge Scholarship. 50 CTE seniors received scholarships at CTE Senior Awards Night. So really huge shout out to them. We also have additional students who were honored for other achievements, including 37 students who won the prestigious Massachusetts Seal of Biliteracy, and 11 students earned the seal with distinction. Also want to congratulate the SHS Band for winning a gold medal at the Great East Festival. We also have an athletic season wrap-up, and it was a really exciting athletic season. Our sports team had another great season. Girls lacrosse, boys baseball, and boys outdoor track and field are the 2024 Greater Boston League champions. And also congratulations to the baseball coach Matthew O'Donnell, who was named Greater Boston League Coach of the Year. So congratulations to Coach O'Donnell. And finally, we have an award for an educator. The Tufts Community Grant was awarded to a Winter Hill teacher. So I want to congratulate one of our staff members, Tara Beersley Murphy, who wrote a successful Tufts Community Grant, and it was awarded to her. That was a lot of recognition, but there's a lot to celebrate, so it was great to share. Back to you.
Thank you. So next is our report for the personal report, 2024, May 24. I think as far as what we can highlight out of the report is the 16 educators who are retiring, and we celebrated 4 or 5 of them today. So aside from that, there's other components of the report that are not as glamorous or drawing much attention, this in-district transfers and things of that nature. So Again, 16 folks who actually retire, who have been very important to our community. And I know Sean Maguire is in that list as well, but he will be recognized at the proper time.
I think we have a few questions. Ms. Barish and then Mr. Green.
Regarding Mr. Maguire, do you have an update on the new principal hire at the Brown School, or do you know when we might expect to hear more about that?
So we do, but I wanted to properly kind of make the announcement. I think that the community, and so I think the timing of that is important. So we are about to finalize that, and so I want to make sure that we sign on the dotted line before we make any rash decisions. But
So
yes,
soon, it sounds like.
absolutely, very, very soon.
Great.
Yeah, but I wanted to really, the community who was part of the process, I wanted just to make sure that. Yeah.
And then Mr. Green. Oh, sure, Dr. Ackman.
If possible, presuming this signing happens prior to our next meeting, if the person has the bandwidth to come, I think I'll speak for myself, that it'd be neat to meet them.
Mr. Green?
First of all, thank you for that rundown of celebrations and awards and accomplishments. I'm about to feel like a massive hypocrite, because on the one hand, I think we need to think carefully about how we use this time in these meetings more strategically. It has been a long time desire of mine that has been drowned by the fact that we're constantly moving from crisis to crisis, to think about how we can systematically honor and acknowledge the great things and people who are winning these awards in school committee meetings. And so I guess as we are, just continuing this process of returning to actually being an educational body, I'd love to have real thought about how we can honor people more regularly and more systematically.
Does that conclude your report?
That's it, yeah. For the
Okay, that brings us to one report of subcommittees. I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the report of the May 20th report from the Rules Management Subcommittee.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to an MSBA update. Dr. Carmona?
Great. So, Esme, the update, we submitted our EPQ, I believe is the right acronym. So, the School District Educational Profile Questionnaire. So that was done recently. I know Amara was the major brain behind the operation. So that was concluded, submitted, and I know you wanted to make sure that you have that copy of that and we're abreast of what's going on in that document. So yeah, this is a big milestone. And it was done in collaboration with multiple departments and also the principals of each school. So Amara, I don't know if there's anything else that we want to add to the report.
Next time you speak, you should come up, just because the people at home can't hear you. Ms. Barish.
Yeah, I was looking at those, things that we hope to see in the future buildings, and it looked like, and I might have sort of misunderstood the way the chart worked, but it looked like auditorium wasn't listed and spaces for administration and guidance weren't listed, and I was just curious about that. I didn't know if it was, I just would like to know more about why we aren't asking for the moon.
Great question. And I do think when the city's here, they could be helpful with that, but because they have a lot of experience with the MSBA process. But what we understood from IAM is that auditoriums tend not to be funded through the MSBA process. But we did ask for a lot, I would say, in light of what they typically fund.
That's helpful, thank you.
Mr. Green, did you have a question?
I just wanted to, as a small thing, thank the body for, and I think maybe we might want to put this somewhere public, for that really good breakdown of how old our buildings actually are. Because I think, you know, there's a widespread expectation that, you know, we're going to do this, and our schools are in somehow much worse shape and much older than they are. And reality is, once we resolve the issues with the Winter Hill and the Brown, if we do maintenance properly, we shouldn't be here again before 2046 at the earliest. Which I think is something the community probably should hear and know.
Further questions? So what are our next milestones with the MSBA?
What's the next one?
We're going to meet with the MSBA about what we've submitted in the next couple of weeks, and we'll hear back from them about what more information they need. But I think there's a capital plan that is due in August. I have to look at the list, but that will be mostly completed by the city side.
Great, thank you. Mr. Green?
I'm going to probably ask this question at every meeting. Do we have any news from the city on this quote-unquote advisory committee? And if not, can we really push to find out what the plan and timeline is?
I could say that we've been, I don't know, Dr. Carmona. We've been meeting with them about when they were going to put out a request for folks to join the committee, and that should be within the next week or so for some of the members of the advisory.
Not that we have any influence, but I would like to, if you're willing to make the request as a follow-up, is they listed priority areas for the members, and what they didn't note was the preference given to Brown and Winter Hill, like families or related parents, which I think is fine, but I do know people who applied from other schools, and it had had the entire list of priorities been made transparent, they maybe would not have put in the effort. So I'm curious if you're willing to make the request that, who, to Mr. Green's point, like what they will be doing, but also who they want for it, and the paragraph was good last time, but if they could express more, that would be useful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm happy to relay the message. Thank you, Dr. Ackman.
Ms. Patone and then Mr. Green.
Thank you through you, Chair. I just wanted to share something that was shared by Director Raish in the last Buildings Maintenance Committee, which was they clarified that the 18 months technically for them starts April 1st of this year. So even though, so it doesn't necessarily mean, so number one, so they believe they need to have a decision by the end of September 2025. So that's from April 1st, and if I did my math wrong, I apologize, but definitely April 1st is the start, end of 2025, September. It's a finalized decision, and they were clear, at least Director Raish was, that it may not take that long. So this is the window that they have and kind of the deadline they need for a decision, but it could be shorter. So that was, to me, encouraging, because I think originally it was just the 18 months, and I didn't understand when it was going to start. So it sounds like there's some space in there to accelerate the activity, but specifically we're talking about the timing. So I hope that's helpful. I don't know.
Mr. Green?
Thank you, but my first thought is that means we're down to 16 months because April 1st was 2 months ago. And, let's be honest, it's kind of ridiculous, right? To Dr. Ackman's point, the fact that we're not clear if we think this is a decision that affects all parents and all families and they should all be involved, or if it only affects the Brown and the Winter Hill. failure of leadership. The fact that we announced this plan in March and the Go Radio was silent from April 1st, apparently an April 1st start time for an 18-month process, failure of leadership. So like I'd really like to see the city step up and like live up to its own stated goals and plans in a way that they haven't yet in this process. Because I want to also remind you, we could have created this advisory committee a year ago. And, you know, this is, whether we need the time or not, this is time we're leaving families with obvious and needed questions that remain unanswered. And like last week, or two weeks ago, when the Winter Hill kids were here, and they don't think we're gonna break ground for 4 years, like a sense of urgency has been lost. And as much as I think we're gonna do everything we can to make the Edgerly as nice as it can be, if it was a good long-term schooling solution, we'd been using it for that. But instead, we've been trying very hard to get kids out of it since I've been on school committee. So what can we do to relight a fire into the city and make them realize that, no, this isn't just, we'll do the MSBA timeline. There's actual urgency to do whatever we can when we can.
I don't think you'll get any arguments from anybody in this room. Dr. Ackman.
Thank you. Mr. Green reminded me of, I hope this isn't too off topic, a follow-up. That, again, a request that I'd love to know from the city on behalf of the Winter Hill families. Will there be exterminators in the Edgerly building over the summer? Because those children deserve, as much as possible, a rat-free school.
Do you have an update from the joint committee, Mr. Bitone?
Through you, Chair, I'm trying to pull that up right now. And I apologize, I did not prepare the report out for this meeting. Yes, I can tell you next week. We did speak about this, the rodent problem, at the joint school building facility and maintenance committee during what I'll admit was a shoehorned agenda topic. Both school committee members present and city councilors piled on to convey the serious urgency of dealing with the rodent problem. I will follow up with you about specifics on that, because I don't feel that we had a satisfactory response, but I defer to my colleagues.
Through you, Chair, just wanted to add that DPW wasn't at the meeting when we talked about rats, and they're the people who are responsible for exterminating the building, so there was a request for follow-up. There's also an issue about what rodent-side they are legally allowed to use, and apparently ISD is consulting to DPW to help them figure out the best approach. So more to come, but nothing really happened.
Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you. Just to follow up, I think it's a team effort. We're all remembering different bits of this conversation. There was some conversation about a better understanding of rodents in general in the schools, so not to minimize what's going on in the Edgerly, but apparently there's reports going on in other schools that there's rodent challenges, and so there was some discussion about how to quantify that. So I guess that's what I put forward to the administration, is that to request that you work with the DPW and figure out how do we assess kind of the hot spots. And also acknowledge, there was some conversation about the Edgerly in particular that open food is a problem. Well, open food wouldn't be a problem if rodents weren't already in the building, right? So they're getting in somehow, so there's an issue in terms of accessibility to that building, and not in a good way. We're always talking about accessibility in a positive way, but clearly there's, the envelope of this building is permeable, and in a way that is not beneficial to the students. So anyway, that was the question, is it A, where are the hot spots in the whole district, and B, what would be a concerted effort district-wide over the summer to make progress on this problem?
Green.
Again, thank you, Mr. Tone. I'm going to make a request at the next meeting with DPW's president, you remind them that open food is a reality of being in the school. So like, we're gonna have kids, we're gonna have food. So blaming that on the rodent problem, it doesn't matter. Move on, figure it out.
Mr. Buton?
Yeah, through you, Chair, to Mr. Green, 100% blaming our students and teachers for having food in a school is not a productive conversation. So we need to move past that and get to real solutions.
Ms. Buton?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Is there a chance that there can be some report out from administration at our next regular meeting in terms of what the plans are, or at least whatever progress you can make between now and then, because that's our last public meeting, and I'd hate to kind of get on the back end in September and find out that it may or may not have been a priority. P.S. DPW really does try to step up and really works hard with us, and so I want to be really clear that this is not disparaging of DPW. It's just, requesting more visibility and transparency around this issue and what administration can do to support the city in terms of addressing this. So thank you.
Through the chair, I think we can probably share an update on our last meeting that we had with DPW.
Yeah, I'm happy to. We met with DPW and folks from the Environmental Protection Department, the rat czar, Colin and Alicia Pravert, and they shared some of the things that they're doing now and what they're hoping to do in the future. They mentioned the rodenticide. I'm learning these terms in this role, so forgive me. And so because of the concerns with that and the secondary harm it causes to other animals, they can't really have that in the schools, and so they're looking to move to A24 traps, smart boxes. So those are the things that they're requesting in the budget to be able to do in the schools, and that we're pushing them for that. They're also working with the city of Cambridge around rodent fertility and a product called Evolve. And so that, I think they're piloting that with the high school. The other thing that they offer that I think is underrated, but will probably have a really big impact, is walkthroughs in all of the schools, so that they can hear firsthand where the hot spots are and what to do about it. And there are a lot of mitigation strategies that probably don't actually include traps and things like that, including closing up holes. And while schools are always, food is always going to be in schools, there are ways that we can store it better, and some schools are doing it better than other schools, and so some of that is on culture in various schools. I think that there's some other things that they're looking into. I'm not sure if I forgot anything, but that essentially was our last meeting, and we have been working on having a closer relationship with between the buildings and DPW directly, which I think would be helpful as well.
Great.
Through the chair, if I can just add a couple of things. So we have had these meetings, and we just submitted information or shared that information in my weekly update with principals about what is the expectation, how to call DPW directly. Also, they said there's a double cleaning that needs to happen. We will be available. I think on that note, as to the willingness for them to support the needs that we have, are clear. The city, the rat czar said to us, is about water, shelter, and food, and these animals are really good at it. And so one of the things that we are trying to do is just go around with them just to make sure that access points are identified and closed. And they chew through everything, that's my understanding. And so I think that probably there might be a network of tunnels that we have to address at some point. But as to the question of the frequency and the number on where do we have more or not, I think the mechanism that we use right now is the 311 system. So there's no one like with a clicker just like rat. But I think that is a question that we keep on. I mean, we know the two hottest spots in the city. Is that right? But that is a question in terms of like how do we determine the metric to identify where is it showing up more and how are we determine the increase or the improvement. So that's a question that is worth exploring.
Dr. Ackman and then Mr. Buton.
Thank you, and I didn't mean to derail us by getting on, but I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. I also, this sounds like a comprehensive thing that I don't know if it would quite fit into 8th grade civics, but sounds like something that a science teacher, civics teacher, you know, like learning about the rodenticide, you know, all of that sounds like a really interesting learning project because rats are, while carry disease, are incredibly clever. So just noting that.
Mr. Buton.
Thank you, Chair, through you. One question that I have around all of this, and nothing lights up the school committee like rats, I guess. Like, this is like city council. They just get really excited about rats. Are we taking off the table any legally appropriate or best practice statewide practices here in Somerville that are used elsewhere in the state? The techniques you spoke about, and I have tremendous respect for Colin and his colleagues, the rat czar and czarina. I don't know if we have how many the rat czar royalty we have now. But I'm wondering, you know, we need to use best practices, but we also need fewer rats in our schools. So I just want to know, are we taking anything off the table that maybe we could, you know, consider when things get really bad? So I don't know, for your next conversation with DPW.
Just I will add a note to that. During the breaks, I know they do more sticky traps. So usually when kids are not around, that allows us to dispose of, you know, dead rats. But that's usually during the breaks, and so we'll have to find out exactly when and how are those practices will be put in place, because kids will not be in buildings in some cases. But that's the question that we have asked: is there an alternative? Is there something else there? I mean, I know they're thinking about even for, you know, the issue of rat fertility. So as far as I know, they have been, you know, looking for options. But if there's anyone who finds an option, you know, we are open to explore it. But that was the same question we asked: is it, what else can we do?
Mr. Buton.
Sorry, thank you for the follow-up, Chair, through you. One thing I did hear, and I don't know if this was at the committee meeting or in another venue, but that these smart boxes are incredibly expensive. And I feel like there have to be lower cost, feasible options that we have. You know, we've been fighting rats for decades and they're winning, but we have tools in our toolbox. So anyway, thank you, appreciate it.
All right, it looks like that covers the rats for this evening. It's okay, it's an important topic. Okay, I think that covers the MSBA then. Okay, that brings us to second reading of the resolution on Somerville climate action. I will
To approve?
Yep, I have a motion to approve by Mr. Green, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to some files for a second reading to be removed from our policy manual. I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second. I have a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Dr. Phillips, to remove these policies. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to a policy for a second reading. File BGC, Policy Revision and Review. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve file BGC policy revision and review.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Is there any discussion? Mr. Green?
First, as a point of clarity, it feels like I was different than what I read 2 weeks ago. It feels like it has more detail about like the superintendent and the thoroughness of the reporting out, and it feels like it's different than the one I was in, like, and in ways I find kind of concerning, because as laid out in this policy, this is a lot of work, and nothing in the policy that talks about how it would be done, how we pay for it to be done. Like, this is, as written in the policy as I see it here, a fairly dramatic piece of work to have a policy done for 5 years, and without some real safeguards, and it says how we do it, I can assure you it won't get done. And I'm not here to pass policies that just that we know won't be followed.
It shouldn't be different from what was in there last time. I did notice that there were several copies of this in the folder, so I don't know if maybe, I didn't look at all of them, but there's a redlined version, which is what it should have been. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the same as it was last meeting. But Mr. Batone might be better able to speak to it since he created this for us.
If I may, through you, Chair. There appears to be a May 20th version that should supersede the May 13th version. Which is the one that, I'm sorry.
In the folder that's currently just called markup, is that May 13th or May 20th? Is that the current one?
There's two marked up versions. One is labeled the 20th and in the folder. So
I think in the interest of time, since it's late and we're all tired and we do have one more meeting and this is not urgent, I'm going to propose that we table this until our next meeting and make sure we have whatever is the most recent version in that packet, and we'll discuss it then. Okay, great. That is tabled to our next meeting. All right, that brings us to an update on superintendent evaluation timeline. I will ask Dr. Phillips to come up and lead that conversation.
Do you mind if I just do it here?
That's fine.
Awesome. Thank you. Can tell I'm getting tired. Okay, so managing the superintendent is one of the 4 main things that a school committee has power over. Evaluation is a critical component of management. My goal is for us to provide the superintendent with authentic and useful feedback as part of the evaluation process, and bring our superintendent evaluation in line with the evaluations we do for our principals and educators. Next week, we are going to do Dr. Carmona's midterm evaluation. This is a formative assessment. It is low stakes. It is a chance for us to ask questions and give Dr. Carmona feedback before we get to the high stakes summative evaluation. Dr. Carmona's goals menu and the rubric we'll be using for his summative evaluation are in the packet for this week. In the packet for next week, we should also get an update from Dr. Carmona to shape our discussion. Please really read these documents carefully. Just like I know you will, come prepared with your noticings, your wonderings, and your suggestions. At the same time, before we talk details about timeline, Dr. Carmona, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that you're looking to us for during this formative assessment.
So the formative will be around the goals on the entry plan and the strategic plan, as well as how we have kept with the managing all the day-to-day operations. So, feedback is always welcome, even the way how I will be presenting a set of PowerPoint slides or a slide deck. So you can have a greater picture of where we are in terms of that, what was stated on my original goals. So that will be basically the emphasis of that is how are these pieces moving along? Is there any coherence? Is there a need for revisiting ways in which that is communicated? There's a lot, and I know that we just met today at the all administrative team. And we were thinking about how do we make sure that all these things that we have lined up will be a reality. And part of the question and the concern is how do we make sure that the priorities, since there are so many needs, are done in a way that is thoughtful. So, that's another point of feedback is how do we look at all these initiatives and make sure that it doesn't become, that is managed in a way that it creates a sense of accomplishment.
Thanks. And before I open it up, I just want to quickly check in about timeline. I'm asking you to think of this as like a first reading, but we had originally set the summative for the end of the calendar year. In talking with Dr. Carmona's superintendent coach, she suggested getting our superintendent evaluation on a September to September timeline, and the rationale is really so that our superintendent goals are set before principals set their goals. Those are due to DESE in mid-October. Is that right?
Correct.
In mid-October, and in an ideal world, their goals are related to the superintendent's goals. So if we get the superintendent on an earlier schedule, that will be possible, and that will help increase alignment and coherence in the district. So we can come back to that next time, but I'm proposing that as a first reading now. Do you want to manage questions? Do you want me to?
Sure, I can. Did you want
Can
to
I,
respond to that?
just one clarification. I think that a better timeline would be August to August, because it would allow, because usually by the time September comes in, it will be a little bit late to get everyone lined up on those. So August to August might be a better timeline.
Yeah, August to August.
Mr. Green?
I probably have a bunch of questions I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with, I think, the basic one. So as of the end of next meeting, what do we propose to have when we say a formative assessment? Like, what is the product?
There is no product, there's a discussion and feedback. So we're not documenting anything, it is purely a discussion. That is the way that DESE sets it out in their guidance, and MASC sets it out in their guidance. The idea, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you don't want your superintendent to walk into their summative evaluation having no idea how it's going to go. And so you want to stop and pause midway through, just like you would with any staff, and just check in on where you are on your goals and the competencies that you're being evaluated on.
Mr. Green?
And so if we were hypothetically to take the August schedule, since we only meet once in August, it would be doing a formative assessment that first week. I got to say, I do not like the idea of leaving this hanging open over the summer. It just feels like an invitation for nitpicking. Just knowing how people are, knowing how we are in Somerville, it seems like an open invitation to spend the summer being like, well, I think blah, 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 all summer long about the superintendent's performance. And that feels like asking for trouble for the superintendent that I don't want to be asking for. That's where my gut is right now.
Dr. Phillips?
I just want to remind you that this formative assessment in June was the original timeline that we had set back in the beginning. I don't know that it really changes that much to move it from December to August. There's still a lot of work happening over the summer.
No, that part I actually like. I'm just concerned, I think in a vacuum, if we were going to do it over 2 meetings, I wouldn't have it be our last meeting before recess and our first meeting back. That just feels problematic to me in a lot of ways. I'm not sure there's a better solution, but I want to own that. It feels like it's just basically leaving the superintendent to dry all summer.
I'm sorry, I think I'm missing something here because it's just one and done, next meeting. Formative assessment, done. Not over 2, it's just feedback. Summative, that's in August.
Ms. Barish?
My understanding is the one that Dr. Phillips is proposing we're doing or has planned to do next week is like a mid-year review, and the one at the end of August would be the end-of-year review, although the timing is just funky because it's the first year. Is that a fair? Okay, thank you.
Is there another, yep, Dr. Ackman?
through the chair to Mr. Green, are you indicating that you would feel more comfortable if, like, while it would be early September instead of late August, that, like, that second meeting would be more comfortable? Like, I think the other piece of, you know, to your point, like, I understand theoretically people nitpicking over the summer, but, like, we're all fully exhausted now and spent, and, you know, aren't going to be the most generous with any of us, right? So it's like, and in December, like, that's how it is in December too. So it's like there isn't an ideal time. And I think it underestimates your colleagues to assume we'll be inundated with trolls over the summer that will hear and then act negatively on their behalf.
Mr. Bitton.
Thank you, Chair, through you. The timing is a little awkward for me because we're talking about having what I appreciate my colleague Ms. Barish described as the mid-year review in the last meeting in June, and then in the first meeting back in August, we might have the actual review. That feels like, unless even if we have very minor concerns or issues to address, Dr. Carmona would have to be a remarkable turnaround artist, which I have no doubt he is, to address those concerns. So that timing feels awkward just for this first implementation period. I might, for myself, feel more comfortable targeting September for this first year with the goal of getting to an August to August as Superintendent Carmona has requested. So I'll just leave it there. The timing does feel awkward for me.
I was going to propose something similar in that, you know, we do what we can for this year, and then next year have the goal be August to August. I have Mr. Green and then Ms. Barish.
Building on that, like, I understand that formative would normally be a mid-year review. It's not this time, and like trying to act like it is when you're going to have, to Mr. Patone's point, if we were to do it by a proposed schedule, we wouldn't actually have time to get new information before we did some of the report. So I am less inclined to treat this year's formative summation as a mid-year than I would be going forward. I think that's the right thing going forward, and maybe if we're going to do it as a mid-year, we do it in December. So I appreciate and I very much agree with the superintendent not should not go into his summative eval without some clue of where people stand, which is actually my concern about the next meeting, is that, like, there are concerns, we voice the concerns, and then we're silent for 2 months. And that's where I think, and like, whether or not that leads to people trolling the committee or whatever, that's where the problem is that, like, there's just 2 months after voicing concerns where there's not time to deal with them, to Mr. Patone's point, but there's also no response to how we handle them other than in that moment. And that feels, that's where the feeling of, I don't know, we're doing the superintendent service comes in. I would almost rather, for this year, if we're going to do it over the course of 2 meetings, do the formative in that first meeting back, with the hindsight on a complete year behind us, and then 2 or 3, or however long later, do that formative, with the goal that in the years to come, we do formative sometime in the school year, and summative in that first meeting back in August.
Ms. Barish? And then Dr. Phillips.
I think Mr. Green sort of covered it, but I guess I was just thinking that very little, not that very little would have changed between June and August, but as far as student data or assessments or whatnot, like that, I don't think a lot of that happens over the summer. Maybe the data crunching happens over the summer, so we would be able, you know, there would be a lot for us to learn in September or in August, but I guess I'm just wondering how much would change, what inputs would change to our process between June and August? That's the question. What inputs would we expect to change?
Dr. Phillips.
So I think it's useful to go back to Dr. Carmona's goals memo and what he set out to be evaluated on, right? Goal 1 is just about done. We all know that, right? There's probably some work on the strategic plan that we're going to get to hear about next week that may happen over the summer that we'll hear more about in the fall. Goal 2 is about systems and structures. A lot of that could happen over the summer. A lot is done. And goal 3 is pretty much done. So that's what we're evaluating him on, is what's in this plan. We did not really build in anything about student data this year. We were pretty clear about that as of when we set this up. So I do think that we can very much provide feedback at the end of the year on these goals that will be useful and helpful. And I would hate for our one staff member to show up to their end of the year evaluation having not gotten formal feedback from their board until like the meeting before. That does not at all seem fair and like it's setting anyone up for success. I do hear the point about extending things a little this year, trying to maintain that balance between having the superintendent's goals done before the principal's goals are done, but maybe not right away in August if we can't do it. But I guess Superintendent Carmona, again, sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have concerns about getting feedback from the committee at the last meeting in June and then having kind of your summative assessment for the year in late August, early September?
So, yeah, thank you for the feedback and for the back and forth. I think as we write the timeline of this, it is important for me to really be tight and aligned with the principals. I think that there's two things here. One is the cycle of evaluation and support, and so you can go through that and talk about months and weeks here and there. Really, the essence of this is to make sure that the system is aligned and that the work that we do to set the course and the direction for principals is right, because that's kind of the lever point. As far as what you will be giving me feedback around is two things. One, the goals that are here, and also the rubric from the Department of Ed. Those are two different things. So the Department of Ed rubric has got hundreds of things, which, I'm lucky if I get to say 50% of that was done to fidelity. But you're going to be judging me on operations. You'll be judging me on all the different things that are in that rubric. And so I don't know if that is, so the feedback that I'll be getting around here is very specific. It's information that is very contained around the things that the district is doing and the things that we set out to do. And so I think that just to be specific in terms of the ask, for this particular case, I think the feedback can be done in a way that is manageable. It is a very contained set of goals. And I think that the other feedback that I'll be getting on the summative, which will be, assuming that we do August, it will be a little bit different. And that will help me kind of rethink how I also reset the feedback for the principal. So if you feel that you need to be adjusted in this first year from August to September, that gives a little bit of more time. But with the understanding that should be corrected. The other thing is that if you think about the principal evaluation, it goes from October, there is a midpoint, which is February, and then is the end of the school year. So the timing that we have right now is a little bit awkward because of how we did the work. But the idea is just to have a midpoint correction that is more natural than what we're trying to do right now. So regardless of what we do, it's not going to be perfect. Do we do it in August versus September? Is that going to mean the degree of feedback you're going to give me is going to change the trajectory of how I become a leader? Probably it will, but I doubt that that's the one tool that would make me a total different leader. So I think whether it's 1 month or August or September, I think is at this point, especially being the first one, I don't think it will be that earth-shattering of a difference.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? I feel like because there's been some back and forth on this, maybe we should take a vote on whether we are going to do a summative, no formative evaluation next. We have to. Okay.
And we have to do the formative and we have to do the summative. Like what is the month that we decide to do that? And do we fix the cycle after that?
So we could do it at our first meeting in August, to clarify, the formative assessment, if we didn't. I'm just trying to understand what our options are. Mr. Green?
Yeah, like if there's no product at the end of it, to my original question, what is the legal obligation we're meeting that we have to do something next week?
Can I ask, so when you say product, so let's think about how principals do. They basically submit the evidence to talk about their goals. And then they tell you about their goals, and you look at their goals and you say, great, you met them or you did not meet them. Is that right? So the product is the evidence that I submit, and your product is the response or your comments around whether we use a form. I don't know what is the form that you will be using for superintendent feedback, but there's a product involved in that. It's a statement around met the goals, didn't meet the goals, and this is.
And that's our official summative.
That's the summative. But my question is, if we have to do something next week, what is the thing we have to do, and what is the thing that has to be complete at the end of that meeting?
My understanding is it's just a discussion. I will look at the DESE guide again and the MASC guide, but that's my understanding, is that the formative is a discussion that you want to have, just like you want to have with any of your staff members well in advance of their summative.
Mr. Green?
I hear that, but my question is, we're saying we have to do something next week. So at the end of next week, we have to tell DESE, is the product that we told DESE that we had a formal discussion about his progress? Is that the thing we have to do? Is it to report that out?
I think that it is the kind of have to do, just like you have to do with a superintendent evaluation, right? My recollection is there were years when Mary didn't actually get an evaluation.
That's because the rules change after a superintendent's been here so long, but there is a form that you have to, with numbers that for superintendent, you have to submit to DESE. Is there such a thing for the formative?
I do not believe so. I can confirm that, but I believe it is only for the summative.
Through the chair, I just want to thank everybody for having this conversation. I understand all the challenges. I understand the desire to change the cycle. One of the things, and I'm not going to get into a big conversation about this, but one of the things that I question about changing the cycle is that one of the data points is MCAS, and we don't get MPAS until October. So like, that's one of the reasons I think originally that December was the cycle, but I really appreciate what you're trying to accomplish around trying to have the goals roll down and provide your, so anyway, I'm just throwing that out there as a note. I don't have a problem personally with having a formative conversation next week. I think that if it's something that's going to benefit you as a superintendent to hear formal feedback in a public forum, I'm for it personally. I don't love the idea of our first meeting in August being the summative. It feels a little non-transparent, like so that the community doesn't even know about it. Most people don't even know we're having a meeting, that first meeting in August. That's usually like I don't mean it to be a stealth meeting, nobody does, but parents are not ready for that. So I think that, one of our goals is to be public and transparent. I think we should at least delay it a month if we decide that we're going to try to adjust the cycle. Just throwing that as my opinion. But the net is I want to thank everybody for working on this. I know we haven't done this in the same way that is being proposed now than it was in the past, so I just really appreciate this work and this thoughtfulness. So in short, I'm fine with doing some formative feedback next week, and I guess we're going to be up to conversation about how we move forward with the summative, which I think that's the formal form that we submit.
Correct. Okay. With that then, Mr. Biton.
No, just for clarification, Chair. Are you looking for a motion to
No, at
vote on?
this
Okay,
point,
we're done with this? Great. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate it. Okay, so that brings us to the draft school committee meeting dates. That is just for your information. Ms. Garcia did it for the whole year as opposed to just half the year. So feel free to, look through that and make sure there's no conflicts that we're missing, religious or otherwise. Otherwise, that is just for your information. We did that. All right, we have some donations.
Move to approve a donation of equipment from Greater Boston Plumbing in Braintree, $5,860 to CTE, and a monetary donation. I assume this is the outcome of the work that came from that partnership, Boston Bruins Charitable Foundation, $6,320 that somebody paid for our students. Amazing artistry.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Patone. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to some grants.
Move to accept the federal grant FC 0339, Strengthening Family School Partnership Grants at the Healy for $10,000.
Motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Patone. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to items from committee members. Mr. Green.
I'm too short. I will send everyone the link in an email, but the DESE's Racial Imbalance Advisory Committee put out the 2024 report recently, and they have finally, actually, I would say finally, veered back towards their original goal, which is to study segregation and what have you in the schools, and I might have gotten the acronym wrong on that point. It might have been racial integration, but, and shocking no one, Massachusetts schools are super segregated. But the thing I wanted to highlight, and I think it's interesting, all interesting reading, everyone should read it. The thing I wanted to highlight for Somerville for our decisions going forward is they're finding that it is a better investment to invest in integrating schools than it is to try to improve the quality of segregated schools. So as we're making decisions about school assignment, school assessment, school building, et cetera, that's something we should be mindful of. But the whole thing is interesting reading, but that's the part I wanted to highlight for everyone.
Thank you for that. Are there any other items, Mr. Bitton?
Quick thing also for me, Ward 7 office hours, joint office hours on June 15th, Saturday at 11:30 until 1:30 at Angelina's Pizza on Holland Street in Teal Square. Welcome any folks who want to talk to Pat Jalen, Christine Barber, our state senator and rep respectively, and myself and Judy Pineda-Neufeld, counselor for Ward 7. Thanks.
Great. Any other items from board members? Seeing none, do we have any condolences? Dr. Phillips.
We do. The school committee extends their condolences to the family of Luis P. Piancentini, former Somerville Public Schools Director of Special Education, and Stanley Chip Cody III, son of retired Somerville Public Schools nurse manager Gay Cody.
All right, everyone, we are adjourned. Have a good last week of school.